The Wyoming wind cut through the barn like a blade looking for flesh. Clara Whitmore sat alone on the overturned feed crate, balancing a chipped plate on her knees while her family celebrated 15 feet away. The wooden slats dug into her thighs, not painfully, just enough to remind her she was too heavy for furniture meant for normal people. She'd learned that lesson young. Chairs creak, people notice. Better to find something sturdy, better to disappear. The feast stretched across 3 tables her cousin Jacob had hammered together that morning while she'd been elbow-deep in bread dough since 4 a.m. Roasted venison, buttered potatoes, fresh rolls still steaming, apple pie with cinnamon she'd ground herself because her aunt said store-bought was for lazy women. Clara had prepared every single dish. 47 people eating, laughing, drinking whiskey her uncle kept hidden behind the flour sacks. Not one of them had saved her a seat. "Clara, bring more butter." Her Aunt Margaret's voice sliced through the noise. Clara set down her plate, half-eaten, cold now, and pushed herself up. Her boots scraped against the barn floor. Nobody looked at her. They never did unless they needed something. She found the butter crock near the cooling rack and carried it toward the tables, weaving between bodies that shifted away from her like she carried something contagious. Her cousin Sarah wrinkled her nose as Clara passed. "Careful, don't knock anything over," Sarah muttered, loud enough for the people nearby to hear. A few of them laughed. Clara set the butter down without responding. She'd stopped responding years ago. "While you're up, check the stove." Aunt Margaret didn't look at her. "I smell something burning." Nothing was burning. Clara had checked twice already, but she walked to the cast iron stove anyway, made a show of adjusting the vents, then retreated back to her crate before anyone could find another errand. Her plate was gone. Someone had taken it while she was up. Probably dumped the contents for the dogs. Clara felt something twist in her chest. Not anger, not anymore. Just a dull ache that had become so familiar it felt like part of her bones. She didn't go back for more food. There wouldn't be any left by now anyway. The hired hands always got what the family didn't want, and Clara ranked somewhere below the hired hands. She sat down again, smoothed her skirt, folded her hands in her lap. The wind picked up outside, rattling the barn doors. November in Wyoming meant winter was already sharpening its teeth. Clara could smell snow coming, metallic and clean, the way the air tasted before a storm rolled down from the mountains. Her Uncle Thomas stood at the head of the center table, raising his glass. "To another year of prosperity, to family, to the Whitmore name." Everyone cheered. Glasses clinked. Her younger brother Ethan, 17 and golden-haired, grinned as the ranch foreman clapped him on the back. Ethan worked maybe 4 hours a day and spent the rest gambling in town. The family called him ambitious. Clara worked 16-hour days and they called her useful. There was a difference. "Clara's done well with the cooking this year," someone said. Old Mr. Hendricks, one of the hired men. He meant it kindly. Aunt Margaret's smile went tight. "She's always been good with chores. Keeps her busy?" The conversation moved on. Clara looked down at her hands, rough, reddened, scarred from years of kitchen work and hauling firewood and scrubbing floors until her knuckles bled. She was 22 years old and her hands looked 50. She wondered sometimes what her life would have looked like if her mother hadn't died giving birth to Ethan. If her father hadn't followed 6 months later from a bottle and a broken heart. If Uncle Thomas hadn't taken her in and immediately figured out that a fat, quiet niece nobody wanted was worth more as unpaid labor than his family. But those thoughts didn't lead anywhere useful. The barn doors shuddered again. The wind was getting worse. Then they exploded open. Not figuratively. The wooden crossbar splintered with a crack like a gunshot and both doors slammed inward, bringing a blast of freezing air and dead leaves and the smell of pine and snow. Every conversation died. People turned. A man stood in the doorway. Clara's first thought was that he looked like something the mountains had carved out of stone and decided to let walk. Tall, well over 6 feet, broad-shouldered beneath a heavy coat that was more patches than original fabric. Dark hair tangled with wind and streaked with early gray despite a face that couldn't be older than 35. A scar ran from his left temple down to his jaw, thick and ropey, like someone had tried to peel his face off and quit halfway through. But it was his eyes that made Clara's breath catch. Gray, cold, empty of everything except a kind of patience that felt dangerous. She knew who he was. Everyone in the territory knew. Ronan Vale, the ghost hunter, the war ruin. The man who lived so deep in the mountains that most people assumed he was dead until he appeared in town twice a year to trade furs and bullets and then vanished again like smoke. "Door's broken," Ronan said. His voice was rough, like he didn't use it often. He looked at Uncle Thomas. "Storm's coming. Needed shelter." Uncle Thomas stood slowly. The room had gone silent except for the wind howling through the open doorway. "Ronan Vale," Thomas forced a smile. "Of course. You're welcome to—" "Shut the door, someone," Aunt Margaret snapped. Two hired hands rushed to wrestle the doors closed. The crossbar was ruined, but they managed to prop a bench against the frame. The wind dulled to a muffled roar. Ronan didn't move. He was still looking at Uncle Thomas, waiting. "Please, join us." Thomas gestured to the tables. "We have plenty." That was a lie. They'd already picked the platters clean. But hospitality was law out here, especially during storm season. Turning someone away could mean killing them. Ronan's gaze swept across the room, across the tables crowded with people, across the empty platters and dirty plates, across— He stopped. Clara felt his eyes land on her like a physical weight. She was still sitting on the feed crate, 15 feet from the nearest table, in the shadows near the barn wall where the lamplight didn't quite reach. Alone. Obviously alone. Obviously separated. Ronan stared at her for 3 long seconds. Then he walked toward Uncle Thomas's seat at the head of the center table. Not to the empty spaces near the edges where a latecomer might sit, but directly to the ornate chair Thomas had inherited from his father. Solid oak, carved armrests, the nicest piece of furniture the family owned. Thomas's smile faltered. "That's—" Ronan grabbed the chair, lifted it, turned, and carried it across the barn floor toward Clara. Every eye in the room followed him. He set the chair down directly in front of Clara's feed crate, 6 inches away. Close enough that she could smell pine sap and wood smoke and something wild that didn't have a name. Then Ronan sat down. He didn't ask permission, didn't explain, just settled into the chair like he'd been planning to sit there all along, pulled a hunting knife from his belt, and looked at Clara expectantly. Clara's heart was hammering so hard she thought everyone must be able to hear it. "I don't—" Her voice came out barely a whisper. "I don't have any food." Ronan glanced at her empty hands, at the space where her plate had been, back to her face. "They took yours." Wasn't a question. Clara swallowed. "I finished eating." "No." Ronan turned to look at the room full of frozen, staring people. "They took it." Uncle Thomas cleared his throat. "Now, Ronan, I'm sure there's just some confusion. Get her a plate." The temperature in the barn dropped 10 degrees. "I'm sorry?" Thomas tried to laugh. "There's no need to—" "Get her a plate." Ronan's voice didn't rise, didn't change, but something in it made the hired hands near the door shift their weight and check where their rifles were leaning. "With food on it." Aunt Margaret stood up, her face flushed. "Mr. Vale, Clara is perfectly capable of getting her own food if she's still hungry. She's not a child." "Then why's she sitting on a crate while you're all at tables?" Silence. "She prefers it there," Aunt Margaret said tightly. "Don't you, Clara?" Every face turned toward her. This was the part where Clara was supposed to nod, smile, agree, make it easy for everyone. She'd been doing it her whole life, smoothing over the sharp edges of her family's cruelty so they could pretend they were good people. Ronan was still looking at her. His expression hadn't changed. But there was something in those cold gray eyes that felt like a hand reaching through dark water. Clara opened her mouth. "No," she heard herself say. "I don't prefer it." The words hung in the air like smoke. Aunt Margaret's face went white. "Clara, I don't prefer it," Clara said again, louder this time. Her hands were shaking. "I've never preferred it. You make me sit here because you don't want me at the table. You've never wanted me at the table. That's not true." "It is true." Clara stood up. Her legs felt unsteady, but she forced herself to keep talking. 22 years of silence breaking apart all at once. "I cook every meal. I clean this entire house. I manage the hired hands when you can't be bothered. I do the mending, the washing, the inventory, the everything, and you won't even let me eat with you." "You're being dramatic," Thomas said, but his voice was uncertain now. "Am I?" Clara felt something hot and sharp rising in her chest. When's the last time anyone here asked me to sit at a table? When's the last time someone saved me a plate? When's the last time any of you looked at me like I was family instead of something you're embarrassed to be seen with? Sarah stood up. We don't treat you. You told your friends I was the housekeeper. Clara's voice cracked. Last month, when they came to visit, you introduced me as the housekeeper. Sarah's face went red. I didn't. I'm your cousin. You're being hysterical, Aunt Margaret said coldly. Sit down. You're making a scene. Good, Clara said. Maybe it's time. Ronan hadn't moved. He was watching her with those sharp, assessing eyes. Then he turned back to Uncle Thomas. The plate, he said quietly. Thomas looked like he wanted to argue, looked like he wanted to throw Ronan out. But you didn't throw out Ronan Vale. Not unless you wanted to find out if the stories about him were true. He jerked his head at one of the hired hands. Get her some food. The man scrambled to pile together scraps from what was left. A piece of venison, half a roll, some cold potatoes. He carried the plate to Clara like he was approaching a wild animal. Clara took it. Her hands were still shaking. Ronan pulled his knife and speared the venison off her plate, bit into it, chewed slowly while the entire room watched. This is good, he said. You make this? Clara nodded. All of it? Yes. Ronan looked back at the family. She makes all your food? No one answered. Cleans your house, runs your ranch? Thomas shifted. Clara helps out, of course, but how much do you pay her? The question landed like a stone in still water. Thomas blinked. Pay her? For her labor. Ronan's voice stayed level. Calm. The kind of calm that came before violence. You pay your hired hands. How much do you pay her? She's family, Aunt Margaret said sharply. We provide room and board. She earns the room and board 20 times over. Ronan stood up. He was a full head taller than Uncle Thomas and twice as wide. Sounds like you've been stealing from her. Now you wait just a goddamn minute. How long? Ronan looked at Clara. How many years you been working for them? Since I was 8, Clara whispered. 14 years. Ronan turned back to Thomas. 14 years of cooking, cleaning, managing hands, keeping this place running. No pay, no respect, no seat at the table. He smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. That's called slavery, Thomas. The room exploded into shouting. You can't just come in here. This is family business. She's my niece. I have every right. Ronan waited for the noise to die down. When it didn't, he pulled a pistol from beneath his coat and set it on the table. Didn't aim it, didn't threaten. Just set it down like a period at the end of a sentence. The shouting stopped. Here's what's going to happen, Ronan said quietly. You're going to compensate Clara for her labor, fair wages for 14 years. Then you're going to let her leave if she wants to leave. No arguments, no guilt, no hunting her down later. Thomas's face was purple. You can't. I own the water rights to the creek that feeds your cattle land. Every drop of color drained from Thomas's face. Clara's stomach dropped. The creek. The ranch's entire water supply came from the mountain creek that ran through the western pasture. Without it? You're lying, Thomas said, but his voice was shaking. Check the county records. Ronan crossed his arms. I bought the rights 8 years ago from the widow Macbeth. Been letting you use the water for free because I didn't care what you did down here. But I care now. You'd destroy an entire ranch. You destroyed a girl for 14 years and called it family. Ronan's voice went hard. So yes, Thomas, I'd destroy your ranch without blinking. Question is whether you're smart enough to avoid it. The silence stretched out like a living thing. Thomas looked at Aunt Margaret, at Ethan, at the hired hands and the family members and all the witnesses watching this disaster unfold. Finally, he looked at Clara. How much? His voice was barely audible. Clara's mind was spinning. She didn't even know what fair wages would. $50 a month, Ronan said. 14 years, plus interest. Thomas made a strangled sound. That's almost $9,000. Actually, it's $8,400. Ronan's smile was sharp. I can do arithmetic, can you? I don't have that kind of... Then sell some land. Sell your fancy furniture. Sell whatever you have to sell. Ronan picked up his pistol and slid it back into his coat. You've got until spring to get Clara her money. Every dollar. And she leaves tonight. With me. No arguments. Clara's heart stopped. What? Ronan looked at her for the first time since the conversation started. Unless you want to stay. Did she want to stay? Clara looked around the barn, at Aunt Margaret's furious face, at Uncle Thomas's humiliation, at Sarah's disgust and Ethan's confusion, and all the people who'd spent years pretending she didn't exist until they needed her labor, at the feed crate in the shadows, at the life she'd been living. Her voice cracked. I don't know where else I'd go. I have a cabin in the mountains. Ronan's expression didn't change. It's small, cold, probably 10 times harder than anything you've dealt with here. But nobody will treat you like you're worthless. He paused. And you'll eat at a table. Clara felt tears burning in her eyes. You don't know me, she whispered. No, Ronan agreed. But I know them, and I know what it looks like when someone's been beaten down so long they forget they're allowed to stand up. He held out his hand. Your choice, Clara. Stay here and wait for your money and hope they don't find a way to cheat you out of it. Or leave now. Clara looked at his hand, scarred, rough, steady. She looked back at her family. No one was meeting her eyes. Clara reached out and took Ronan's hand. His grip was warm and solid, and she held onto it like a lifeline as he led her toward the barn doors. The hired hands moved aside. No one tried to stop them. At the doorway, Clara paused, looked back one final time. I'll send word about where to deliver the money, she said. Her voice was stronger now. Every dollar, Uncle Thomas. $8,400. Then she walked out into the wind and the coming snow and didn't look back. Ronan had 2 horses tied near the fence. He helped Clara onto one, a gentle mare with kind eyes, and swung onto the other. The storm was building fast, the sky gone purple-black, but Ronan didn't seem concerned. It's about 6 miles to the cabin, he said. You ever ridden before? No. Just hold the saddle horn and let her follow my horse. She knows the way. They rode into the darkness with the wind screaming around them. Clara's entire body was shaking, but she didn't know if it was from cold or fear or something else entirely. She'd just walked away from the only life she'd ever known, from the only family she had, into the mountains with a stranger everyone said was dangerous. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt like she could finally breathe. Behind them, the lights of the ranch disappeared into the storm. Clara didn't look back. The girl on the feed crate was gone. Whatever came next, it couldn't be worse than what she was leaving behind. The mare stumbled on loose rock and Clara's stomach lurched. She grabbed the saddle horn tighter, her knuckles white even in the darkness. The wind had teeth now, biting through her thin shawl like she wasn't wearing anything at all. Snow was starting to fall. Not the gentle kind from picture books, but hard pellets that stung her face and made it impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. Ronan's horse was a dark shape moving through the storm. Clara focused on following it, trying not to think about how high up they were climbing, or how the trail kept narrowing, or how one wrong step could send them both over the edge into nothing. She'd never been on a horse before tonight, never been more than 5 miles from the ranch, never seen the mountains up close except as distant shapes on the horizon that turned purple at sunset. Now she was riding into them in the middle of a blizzard with a man she didn't know, and every rational part of her brain was screaming that this was insane. But she didn't turn back. The trail climbed steeper. Clara leaned forward like Ronan had shown her, trusting the mare to find footing in the dark. Her thighs were already burning from gripping the saddle, and her hands had gone numb inside her thin gloves. The shawl was useless. Snow was piling up on her shoulders, melting against her neck, soaking through her dress. She was going to freeze to death out here. Then Ronan's horse stopped. Clara's mare halted behind it, breathing hard. Through the snow, Clara could barely make out a dark shape that might have been a building. Ronan dismounted and walked back to her. "We're here," he said. His voice was rough from the wind. "Can you get down?" Clara tried to swing her leg over, but her body wouldn't cooperate. Everything was stiff and cold and shaking. Ronan reached up and lifted her off the horse like she weighed nothing. Her legs buckled when her feet hit the ground. "I've got you." His arm was steady around her waist. Just a few more steps. He half carried her toward the cabin while the horses followed. Clara's boots kept catching on hidden rocks and roots, but Ronan didn't let her fall. A door opened. She didn't see him unlock it. Maybe it wasn't locked. and then they were inside and the wind cut off like someone had slammed a lid on the world. The darkness was absolute. Clara heard Ronan moving around. A match scraped and flared. He lit a lantern and warm light spilled across a single room that was smaller than the ranch kitchen. A wood stove in the corner. A table with 2 chairs. A bed built into the wall. Shelves holding supplies. A rifle mounted above the door. Sit. Ronan guided her to one of the chairs. Her dress was soaked through, snow melting in her hair, and she couldn't stop shaking. Ronan moved fast. He got a fire started in the stove, hung the lantern on a hook, then disappeared back outside. Clara heard him dealing with the horses, the creak of saddles being removed, low words she couldn't make out, the stamp of hooves. Minutes later, he came back inside carrying his saddlebags and kicked the door shut behind him. You need dry clothes. He was already pulling things out of a trunk. These will be too big, but they're warm. He handed her a wool shirt and canvas pants that looked like they'd been made for someone twice her size. Clara just stared at them. I can't. Her teeth were chattering. These are men's clothes. They're warm clothes. Ronan turned his back. Change, unless you want to lose fingers to frostbite. Clara's hands were shaking so badly she could barely work the buttons on her dress. The wet fabric clung to her skin and she had to peel it off. She'd never undressed in front of anyone before. Not that Ronan was looking, but he was right there in the same room, and she was suddenly aware of how much space her body took up. How the candlelight probably showed every curve and fold she'd spent her life trying to hide. But the cold was worse than the shame. She pulled on the wool shirt. It hung to her knees. The pants required rolling up at the ankles, and she had to tie them tight with a piece of rope Ronan handed her without turning around. They were still too big, but they were dry, and they were warm, and that was all that mattered. Done, she whispered. Ronan turned back. If he had any thoughts about how ridiculous she looked, his face didn't show it. He hung her wet dress near the stove to dry, then filled a pot with snow from outside and set it on to melt. We'll make coffee once that's hot, he said. You hungry? Clara realized she was starving. She'd barely eaten anything at the feast, just those few bites before her plate disappeared. I don't want to be a burden. Ronan looked at her. You're not a burden. You're a person who hasn't eaten. Different things. He pulled out bread and dried meat and a jar of something that might have been preserves, set them on the table between them, poured the now hot water over coffee grounds in a battered tin pot. Eat, he said. Clara reached for the bread slowly, half expecting him to snatch it away. When he didn't, she tore off a piece and put it in her mouth. It was dense and slightly stale, but it tasted better than anything she'd made for the family feast. They ate in silence. Ronan didn't watch her, didn't count how much she took, just ate his own portion and refilled her cup when it was empty. The cabin warmed up, the shaking stopped. Claire's fingers started to tingle as feeling came back. Why did you do that? She asked finally. At the barn. You don't know me. Ronan was quiet for a long moment. I know what you look like sitting on that crate, he said, alone, while they celebrated with your food, your work. He met her eyes. Seen that look before, during the war. People who'd given up on themselves because nobody else saw them as worth saving. The war. Clara's voice was soft. You fought? Yeah. Which side? The losing one. He stood up and started washing the dishes in a bucket of melted snow. Came out here after because I was tired of watching people destroy each other. Figured the mountains would be simpler. Are they? Mostly. He dried the dishes with a rag. Bears don't lie to you. Storms don't pretend to be something they're not. You know what you're dealing with up here. Clara looked around the cabin. It was rough. No curtains, no decorations, no softness anywhere. Just tools and supplies and things meant to keep a person alive through brutal winters. How long have you lived here? 8 years? Alone? Yeah. Clara tried to imagine 8 years of silence. 8 years of no conversations except with yourself. 8 years of nothing but survival. Don't you get lonely? Ronan was quiet. Lonely's better than being around people who make you feel worthless. He hung the rag to dry. You'll sleep in the bed. I'll take the floor. I can't take your bed. You rode 6 miles through a blizzard after walking away from everything you've ever known. You get the bed. He pulled blankets out of the trunk and made himself a pallet near the stove. Clara watched him, this strange man who'd upended her entire life in the span of an hour, and realized she didn't even know the first thing about him. "Why do you really own those water rights?" she asked. Ronan stretched out on his pallet. "Bought them because I could. Kept them because your uncle's an ass and I figured someday I might need leverage." He looked at her. "Didn't expect to need it for this." "Will he really pay me?" "If he wants to keep his ranch, he will, and I'll make sure he does." Ronan closed his eyes. "Get some sleep, Clara. Morning's going to come early." Clara climbed into the bed. The mattress was thin and the blankets were rough, but it was warm and it was clean, and it was hers for tonight. She lay there listening to the wind howl outside and the fire crackle in the stove, and Ronan's breathing even out into sleep. She'd done it. She'd actually left. The thought terrified her and thrilled her in equal measure. Sleep didn't come for a long time. Morning arrived gray and cold. Clara woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Ronan moving around the cabin. She sat up, disoriented. She'd forgotten where she was for a moment. Expected to wake up in her tiny room at the ranch with Aunt Margaret already shouting for breakfast. Instead, she was in a mountain cabin wearing a strange man's clothes. "Coffee's ready," Ronan said. He was already dressed, already moving. "We've got work to do." Clara climbed out of bed. Her dress was dry now, but Ronan handed her the wool shirt and pants again. "Keep those on," he said. "You'll need them." "For what?" "Survival." He poured 2 cups of coffee. "You're staying up here. You need to know how things work. Can't have you freezing or starving the first time I go hunting." Clara's stomach tightened. She'd spent her whole life working, but it had been kitchen work, domestic work. She didn't know anything about surviving in the wilderness. "I don't know how to do any of this," she said quietly. "Then I'll teach you." Ronan handed her the coffee. "Drink, then we start with firewood." The next 3 hours were brutal. Ronan showed her how to split logs with an axe, which was harder than it looked, and left her arms screaming after the first dozen swings. Showed her how to stack the wood so it stayed dry, how to check the stove vents, how to ration the kindling, how to read the sky for incoming weather. Clara's hands blistered. Her back ached. Sweat soaked through the wool shirt despite the cold. But Ronan didn't tell her she was doing it wrong. Didn't sigh in frustration when she missed the log completely and buried the axe in the chopping stump. Just showed her how to adjust her grip and let her try again. "Better," he said, when she finally split a log clean through. Again. By midday, Clara's whole body hurt. They went back inside and Ronan made a simple lunch, more bread, some dried berries, cold venison. Clara collapsed into the chair and tried not to think about how much her muscles were going to hurt tomorrow. "You did good," Ronan said. Clara looked up, surprised. "I barely split 10 logs. 10 more than yesterday." He ate methodically, like it was fuel instead of pleasure. "You'll get stronger." "What if I can't? What if I'm not?" Clara stopped. "Not what?" "Strong enough, capable enough. What if I can't survive up here?" Ronan set down his bread. "You survived 14 years with people who treated you like dirt. You survived cooking for 40 people by yourself. You survived having your entire life stolen from you and still getting up every morning." He met her eyes. "Mountains are hard, Clara, but they're honest. That makes them easier than what you left behind." Clara wanted to believe him. That afternoon he taught her about water, how to melt snow safely, how to keep the supply clean, how to ration during dry spells. Taught her which plants were edible and which would kill her. Showed her how to set basic snares for rabbits. The lessons were relentless, but Ronan was patient in a way Clara had never experienced. He didn't mock her when she failed. Didn't make her feel stupid for asking questions. Just answered and demonstrated and let her try until she got it right. By the time the sun started setting, Clara was exhausted. They ate dinner in silence. Stew Ronan had started that morning, thick with meat and root vegetables. It was simple but good. Clara found herself actually tasting the food instead of just eating to survive. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "Teaching me, bringing me here, all of it." Ronan shrugged. "You needed help, I was there. Most people wouldn't have done what you did. Most people are cowards." He stood and started cleaning up. They see something wrong, and they convince themselves it's not their business. Easier that way. "Why isn't it easier for you?" Ronan was quiet for a long moment. Because I've been that person sitting alone. Different circumstances, same feeling. Nobody came for me. He met her eyes. Figured maybe I could be the person who came for someone else. Clara felt something crack in her chest. That night she slept hard and deep. Woke to Ronan already up, already working. The routine started again. Firewood, water, food preservation, basic repairs. He taught her how to sew heavy canvas, how to patch her boots, how to tie knots that wouldn't slip. Days blurred together. Clara's hands stopped blistering and started forming calluses. Her arms got stronger. The axe felt less impossible. She learned to read the weather by watching the clouds, learned which snow meant a quick flurry and which meant they'd be trapped inside for days. And slowly, carefully, she started to learn Ronan. He woke before dawn every morning, always checked the rifle first thing, spoke more to the horses than to her, but when he did speak to Clara, every word meant something. He never wasted language. He was also completely uninterested in her appearance. Clara kept waiting for him to make some comment about her weight, her face, her body. Kept waiting for the disgust or pity or uncomfortable jokes she'd endured her whole life. But Ronan looked at her the same way he looked at the firewood or the water supply, as something functional that served a purpose. It should have been insulting. Instead, it was the most freeing thing she'd ever experienced. 2 weeks in, Clara accidentally burned the evening stew. Scorched it, black on the bottom, filled the cabin with smoke, ruined half their meat supply for the week. She braced for anger, for punishment, for the inevitable reminder that she was worthless. Ronan looked at the pot, looked at her. "Happens," he said. "We'll eat bread tonight. Tomorrow we'll hunt." That was it. No lecture, no cruelty. Just problem solving. Clara felt tears burning in her eyes and turned away before he could see them. But he saw anyway. "You all right? I ruined dinner." "Yeah, and?" "You should be angry." Ronan was quiet, then, "It's food, Clara. We have more. You're not going to be perfect at everything immediately. That's not how learning works." "My family would have—" "Your family isn't here." His voice was firm but not harsh. "And I'm not them. Burn the stew, break the dishes, split the wood wrong. I don't care. You're trying. That's what matters." Clara wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "Do what?" "Be around someone who doesn't hate me." Ronan looked at her for a long moment. "I don't hate you, Clara. I don't even know you well enough to hate you." He paused. "But I'd like to. Know you, I mean. If you'll let me." Something warm unfurled in Clara's chest. That night they talked. Really talked. Clara told him about her mother, who'd been kind and soft-spoken and died too young. About her father, who'd loved her mother so much he couldn't survive losing her. About being 8 years old and suddenly unwanted, suddenly a burden, suddenly invisible. Ronan told her about the war. Not the battles, he skipped over those, but the aftermath. The men who came home broken. The towns that celebrated their sacrifice and then forgot them 6 months later. The way violence changed a person from the inside out until you didn't recognize yourself anymore. "I killed a lot of people," he said quietly. "Followed orders. Did what I was told. And when it was over, they pinned medals on us and sent us home like that made it all right." He stared into the fire. "Came out here because I was tired of pretending I was the same person who enlisted. That person died somewhere in Virginia. What came back was something else." "Do you regret it? Coming here?" "No." He looked at her. "Do you? Coming with me?" Clara thought about the ranch, the feed crate, the 22 years of being invisible. "No," she said. "Not even a little." December arrived with teeth. The temperature dropped so low that water froze solid in minutes. Snow piled up higher than the cabin windows. The wind screamed day and night like something living and furious. Ronan had warned her, had prepared as much as possible, but Clara still wasn't ready for how brutal winter could be this high up. They were trapped inside for days at a time. Going outside meant risking frostbite in seconds. The world beyond the cabin walls became a white void that wanted them dead. Clara learned what isolation really meant. Just her and Ronan in a single room, day after day, with nothing but each other for company. At the ranch, there'd always been noise, people, chaos. Even when she was alone, she was surrounded by the evidence of other lives. Here, there was just silence, and cold, and waiting. She thought it would drive her crazy. Instead, she found she didn't mind. Ronan was easy to be quiet with. He didn't demand conversation or entertainment. Sometimes they'd go hours without speaking, just existing in the same space, and it felt comfortable instead of awkward. Other times they talked until the fire burned low. Ronan taught her to play cards. Clara taught him a song her mother used to sing. They argued about whether coffee was better strong or weak. They took turns reading from the 3 books Ronan owned, a Bible he admitted he never opened, a collection of wildlife sketches, and a falling-apart copy of Shakespeare that he claimed to have stolen from an officer's tent during the war. "You read Shakespeare?" Clara asked, surprised. "Don't sound so shocked." But he was almost smiling. Educated people aren't the only ones who like stories. One night, Clara woke up gasping. The dream had been vivid. She was back at the ranch, back on the feed crate. But when she tried to stand up, her body wouldn't move. She was stuck there, paralyzed, while her family walked past her again and again without seeing her. "Clara!" She jerked upright. Ronan was crouched beside the bed, his hand on her shoulder. "You're all right," he said quietly. "You were dreaming." Clara's heart was racing. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to wake you." "Don't apologize." He stood but didn't move away. "You want to talk about it?" "It was just—" Clara's voice cracked. "What if this is a mistake? What if I should have stayed? What if I can't actually do this and I'm just—" "Stop." The firmness in his voice cut through her spiral. "You're doing it," Ronan said, right now. "You've been here almost a month. You learned to split wood, set snares, read weather, ration supplies. You survived the first blizzard. You're surviving this one." He paused. "That family convinced you that you were helpless, but they were wrong." "How do you know?" "Because helpless people don't walk away from everything they know into a storm with a stranger. They stay put. They take the abuse because it's familiar." His eyes were steady on hers. "You were brave enough to leave, Clara. Don't lose that now." Clara felt tears slip down her cheeks. "I'm scared." "Good. Fear means you're paying attention, means you respect what you're up against." Ronan moved back toward his pallet. "But don't let it convince you to go back to people who treated you like nothing." Clara lay back down. "Ronan?" "Yeah. Thank you for everything." "Go to sleep, Clara." But she heard something softer in his voice, something that sounded almost like affection. Christmas came and went without ceremony. Clara mentioned the date and Ronan grunted acknowledgement, but neither of them made a fuss. They weren't religious and they had no family worth celebrating. But Clara made extra effort with dinner that night, used some of their precious sugar to make something close to a dessert, heated water so they could both wash properly. It wasn't much, but it felt like marking the day mattered. Ronan noticed. "This is good," he said, eating the sweetbread she'd managed. "It's not much. It's more than I've had in years." He looked at her. "Thank you." Clara felt warmth spread through her chest. That night, Ronan gave her a gift, a pair of proper winter gloves he'd been working on in the evenings when he thought she wasn't paying attention. Rabbit fur lined, carefully stitched, sized for her hands. Clara stared at them. "You made these?" "Figured you needed them. Those thin things you came with won't last the winter." She pulled them on. They fit perfectly. Warm and soft and clearly made with care. "I don't have anything for you," she said quietly. "Don't need anything." "Still, you've given me so much and I haven't—" "You cook dinner. You keep this cabin cleaner than it's ever been. You don't complain when I'm gone hunting for days." Ronan shrugged. "That's enough." But Clara made a mental note. She'd find a way to repay him, somehow. January brought a different kind of cold, the kind that made breathing hurt, the kind that killed. Clara woke one morning to find frost coating the inside of the cabin walls. The fire had gone out sometime in the night, and the temperature had plummeted. Ronan was already up, rebuilding the fire with quick efficiency, but Clara could see him favoring his left side. "Are you hurt?" "Old wound, acts up in the cold." "Let me see." "It's fine." "Ronan," Clara used the voice she'd developed for managing ranch hands. "Let me see." He sighed but pulled up his shirt. A scar ran across his ribs, thick and jagged. Fresh bruising bloomed around it, dark purple against his skin. "What happened?" "Got kicked by a horse 3 days ago, cracked the ribs that were already broken during the war." He pulled his shirt back down. "It'll heal." "You should have told me." Why? Nothing you can do about it. Clara went to the medical supplies, a small box Ronan kept stocked with basics. Found a jar of salve that smelled like pine and something sharper. Sit, she ordered. Ronan looked amused, but sat. Clara warmed the salve between her hands and then carefully applied it to the bruised area. He hissed when she touched the worst of it, but didn't pull away. You're good at this, he said. I've stitched up ranch hands, set broken fingers, delivered 2 calves and a foal. Clara worked the salve in gently. My aunt never wanted to pay for a doctor, so I learned. They took everything from you, even credit for your skills. Clara hadn't thought about it that way. But he was right. Every capability she had, every bit of knowledge, had been used and never acknowledged. Well, she said, at least now I know it's worth something. It's worth a lot. Ronan's voice was quiet. You're worth a lot. Clara's hand stilled. He meant it. She could hear it in his voice. This wasn't empty flattery or manipulation, just honesty. She finished with the salve and stepped back. Try not to move too much for a few days. Yes, ma'am. There was warmth in his eyes now, something that made Clara's heart beat faster. She turned away before he could see her blush. That night the storm broke. The wind died. The snow stopped. When Clara woke the next morning, sunlight was streaming through the window for the first time in weeks. Ronan was already outside. Clara pulled on her coat and the gloves he'd made and went to find him. He was standing at the edge of the clearing, looking out at the mountains. The world was white and pristine and so bright it hurt to look at. It's beautiful, Clara breathed. Yeah. Ronan glanced at her. Storm's over. We'll have a few days of clear weather before the next one. How can you tell? The sky, the wind, the way the birds sound. He pointed. See that hawk? Clara followed his finger. A bird circled high above them, dark against the blue. When they hunt this high up, it means the valleys are snowed in, but the peaks are clear. We've got time. Clara watched the hawk drift on invisible currents. I've never seen anything like this, she said softly. This high up, this quiet. Gets lonely sometimes. Ronan's voice was carefully neutral. But it's honest. The mountain doesn't pretend to be something it's not. Clara looked at him. Do you regret bringing me here? I must be making your life more complicated. Complicated isn't the same as bad. He met her eyes. And no, I don't regret it. Something passed between them. Something Clara couldn't quite name but felt in her chest like a hand squeezing her heart. She looked away first. That afternoon someone came. They heard the horse before they saw it. Ronan went tense immediately, reaching for the rifle. A man on a gray gelding emerged from the tree line. Clara recognized him, one of the ranch hands. Thomas, who'd always been decent to her, who sometimes saved her extra biscuits. Ronan stepped in front of Clara. That's close enough. Thomas raised his hands. I'm not here for trouble, just carrying a message. From who? The Whitmore family. They sent me to find Clara. Clara's stomach dropped. To take me back? No, ma'am. Just to talk. Thomas looked uncomfortable. Your uncle wants to settle accounts. Ronan didn't lower the rifle. He's got until spring. I know, but he wants Clara to know he's working on it, and Thomas hesitated. There's other news. Your cousin Sarah got married last week, to the banker's son. There's going to be a wedding breakfast next month, and your aunt wanted to invite you. Clara almost laughed. She wants me to come back for a party? She said it would mean a lot to the family. The family that made me sit on a feed crate? That family? Thomas shifted in his saddle. I'm just delivering the message, Miss Clara. Tell them no. Clara's voice was steady. Tell them I don't have a home with them anymore. Thomas nodded slowly. I'll tell them. He looked at Ronan. And the money? Every dollar by April or the water shuts off. Ronan's voice was flat. No exceptions. Understood. Thomas turned his horse. Miss Clara, for what it's worth, I'm glad you got out. You deserve better than what they gave you. Then he rode away. Clara stood in the snow, watching him disappear into the trees. You all right? Ronan asked. I thought I'd feel something. When they reached out, guilt, maybe, or doubt. Clara looked at her hands. But I just feel relieved. Good. Is it? They're my family. Family is supposed to take care of you. They didn't. Ronan finally lowered the rifle. You don't owe them anything, Clara. Not your time, not your labor, not your presence at their celebrations. Clara turned to him. When do you think I'll stop waiting for them to come drag me back? When you realize you're strong enough that they couldn't even if they tried. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She lay in bed listening to Ronan breathe and thought about Sarah's wedding. About her cousin getting married to a banker's son in a white dress with the whole family celebrating. Sarah had never worked a day as hard as Clara worked every day. Never sacrificed anything, never went hungry or cold or unloved. And yet Sarah got the wedding, the celebration, the future. Clara got a mountain cabin and borrowed clothes and a man who barely spoke. But when she really thought about it, when she was honest with herself, she realized she didn't want Sarah's life. She wanted this one. The thought terrified her, because wanting this meant wanting Ronan, and wanting Ronan meant risking the only safe thing she'd found since leaving. What if he didn't want her back? What if this was just charity? What if he woke up one day and realized she was exactly what her family always said she was? A burden nobody wanted? Clara squeezed her eyes shut and tried to push the thoughts away, but they lingered like smoke. February came in like something wounded and angry. The temperature dropped so far below zero that Clara's breath froze into ice crystals before it reached the ground. The kind of cold that turned spit solid before it landed. The kind that killed exposed skin in minutes. Ronan barely let her go outside anymore. Storm's building, he said one morning, studying the sky through the cabin window. Big one. Maybe the biggest we'll see this winter. Clara was mending one of his shirts. The seams had split again and he kept putting off fixing it. How long? Could be a week trapped inside, maybe more. He turned from the window. I need to hunt before it hits. We're low on meat. Clara's hand stilled on the fabric. You're going out there. Have to. We won't survive 2 weeks on what we've got. Then I'm coming with you. No. Ronan? No. His voice was firm. You're getting better, but you're not ready for a hunt in this cold. One mistake and you're dead. Clara wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. She could split wood now, could set snares, could do a dozen things she'd never imagined doing 2 months ago. But tracking game through frozen wilderness while a blizzard built overhead? That was beyond her still. How long will you be gone? 2 days, maybe 3 if the hunting's bad. Ronan started gathering supplies. You'll be fine here. Keep the fire going. Don't go outside unless you absolutely have to. If something happens, if someone comes, you use this. He handed her the pistol from his belt. Clara stared at it. I don't know how to shoot. Point at what you want to hit. Pull the trigger. It's loud and it kicks, so hold it with both hands. He demonstrated. But don't use it unless you have to. Understand? Clara nodded, her throat tight. Ronan studied her face. I'll come back, Clara. I've survived worse than this. Promise? Yeah. He squeezed her shoulder briefly. I promise. Then he was gone, disappearing into the white landscape on his horse with his rifle across his back and 3 days of supplies in his pack. Clara stood at the window watching until she couldn't see him anymore. The cabin felt enormous without him in it. She'd gotten used to his presence, the way he moved around the space, the sound of him working, even his silence. Now there was just her and the wind and the creaking of wood contracting in the cold. Clara threw herself into work to keep the fear at bay. She reorganized their supplies, mended every piece of clothing that needed it, baked bread they didn't need just to have something to do with her hands, checked the fire every hour even though it didn't need checking. Night fell early and hard. Clara ate alone at the table, the chair across from her empty. She tried to read but couldn't focus, tried to sleep but kept jerking awake at every sound, convinced something was wrong. This was stupid. Ronan had been clear, 2 or 3 days. He'd been surviving out here alone for 8 years before she showed up. He'd be fine. But Clara couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting, that the fragile peace they'd built was about to shatter. The second day was worse. The storm Ronan had predicted started building around noon, the sky turning that particular shade of gray that meant serious snow was coming. Wind picked up, rattling the shutters, finding every crack in the cabin walls. Clara kept the fire blazing, checked their water supply, made sure the door was secured properly. All the things Ronan had taught her. But she kept looking out the window, hoping to see him riding back. Nothing. By evening, the snow had started. Not the gentle kind, but the vicious pellets that came almost horizontal in the wind. Visibility dropped to nothing. The world outside became a white void. If Ronan was still out there, he was in serious trouble. Clara tried not to think about it, tried to trust that he knew what he was doing, that he'd found shelter, that he'd wait out the storm somewhere safe. But the fear sat in her chest like a stone. She was checking the fire for the 100th time when she heard the horse. Hope surged through her. Ronan was back, he'd made it. But then she heard voices. Multiple voices. Men's voices. Clara's blood went cold. She grabbed the pistol with shaking hands and moved away from the door, pressed herself against the wall beside the window where she could see out, but wouldn't be immediately visible. 4 men on horseback emerged from the snow, rough-looking, armed. Not ranch hands she recognized. One of them dismounted and pounded on the door. "Clara Whitmore, we know you're in there." Clara's heart was hammering so hard she thought it might break her ribs. She didn't answer. Another voice, deeper. "Your uncle sent us. He wants you to come home." "We can do this easy or hard, miss. Your choice." Clara looked at the pistol in her hands. 4 men. She had maybe 6 shots if the gun was fully loaded. The math wasn't good. The pounding came again, harder. "Open up or we're coming in." "I'm armed." Clara's voice came out stronger than she felt. "You break that door down and I'll shoot whoever comes through first." Silence. Then laughter. "You hear that, boys? The fat girl's got a gun." More laughter. Clara felt her face burn but kept the pistol steady. "Listen, sweetheart," the deep voice again. "We're not here to hurt you. Your family's worried. They just want you home safe. That mountain man's got you confused." "Imam." "I'm not confused." Clara moved closer to the door, keeping the gun aimed. "And I'm not going anywhere. You tell my uncle I said no." "Can't do that. He's paying us to bring you back. One way or another, you're leaving with us." Clara's mind raced. 4 armed men. Ronan was gone. The storm was getting worse. She couldn't fight them and she couldn't outrun them, but she could stall. "My uncle's a liar," she called out. "Did he tell you about the water rights?" Pause. "What water rights?" "The creek that feeds the ranch. Ronan Vale owns the rights. That's why my uncle really wants me back. He thinks if he gets me away from Ronan, he can negotiate the water without paying what he owes me." She heard murmuring outside, the men talking amongst themselves. "That true?" A new voice, younger. "I don't know. Thomas didn't say anything about water rights." "Thomas Whitmore's a desperate man," Clara continued. "The ranch is failing. He owes me $8,000 in back wages, and he's trying to avoid paying by dragging me home. You're helping him steal from me." More arguing outside. "Good. Divide them. Make them question." "Even if that's true," the deep voice said, "we've got a contract. You're coming with us. In this storm, you'll kill us all trying to get back." "Then we wait it out. In there. With you." Clara's stomach dropped. 4 men. In the cabin. With her. For however long the storm lasted. "No." "I'll burn it down before I let you in here," she said. "You'll freeze to death." "Better than what you're planning." Silence. Then the sound of someone forcing the door. Clara fired. The shot was deafening in the small cabin. The kick knocked her back 2 steps. She heard cursing outside, scrambling. "She shot at us!" "I said I was armed!" Clara's ears were ringing. "Next one won't be a warning." "You crazy bitch!" Then a different sound cut through the chaos. A rifle shot from the tree line. The men outside scattered, diving for cover. Another shot. One of the horses screamed and bolted. Clara's heart leaped. Ronan. "That's far enough." His voice carried through the storm, cold and deadly. "Next shot takes one of you down." "Vale?" The deep voice. "This isn't your business." "She's in my cabin." "That makes it my business." Clara could see him now, barely visible through the snow. On foot, rifle raised, moving toward them with the careful precision of someone who'd done this before. "We're just doing a job, Itty. Job's over. Get on your horses and ride out. Thomas Whitmore's paying us good money. Thomas Whitmore's a coward who sends hired guns to kidnap women in the middle of winter." Ronan was closer now, close enough that Clara could see his face through the window. Absolutely calm, absolutely dangerous. "You want that money bad enough to die for it?" One of the younger men was already backing toward his horse. This ain't worth it, Jack. She's not going anywhere in this storm anyway. We leave empty-handed. We don't get paid. We leave dead. We don't get anything at all. The young one mounted up. I'm out. He rode off into the snow. The others exchanged looks. 3 against 1 now, but Ronan had the rifle in the high ground and the kind of stillness that said he'd already decided how this ended. Smart choice, Ronan said to the one who'd left. He looked at the remaining 3. Rest of you want to join him? The deep-voiced one, Jack, stared at Ronan for a long moment. Then he spat in the snow. This isn't over. Yeah, it is. Ronan's finger was still on the trigger. You come back here, you're dead men. All of you. Clear? Jack mounted his horse. The other 2 followed. They rode into the storm without looking back. Ronan waited until they were completely gone before lowering the rifle. Then he turned toward the cabin. Clara threw open the door and he stumbled inside, bringing cold and snow with him. She slammed the door shut and dropped the crossbar. Are you all right? Ronan was checking her over, looking for injuries. I'm fine. I missed when I shot. Good. You were just scaring them. That's all you needed to do. He was breathing hard, his face red from cold. They didn't hurt you? No. They just showed up and demanded I go with them, and I told them no, and then they were going to force their way in, and Clara's words were tumbling over each other. How did you know? How did you get back so fast? Saw their tracks about a mile out, rode hard. Ronan was already moving, checking the window, making sure the cabin was secure. They'll probably head back to the ranch. Storm's too bad to do anything else. They said my uncle sent them. Yeah, I figured. Ronan finally stopped moving and looked at her. Really looked at her. You did good, Clara. Kept them talking. Didn't let them in. That was smart. Clara's hands were still shaking. I was terrified. Fear's normal. You handled it anyway. That's courage. Clara felt something break loose in her chest. All the adrenaline, all the terror, all the rage at her uncle for sending men after her came flooding out at once. She started crying and couldn't stop. Ronan caught her before her knees buckled, guided her to the chair. Didn't try to quiet her or tell her she was overreacting. Just let her cry it out while he built up the fire and made coffee and gave her space to fall apart. Eventually, the tears stopped. Clara wiped her face with her sleeve. I'm sorry. Don't be. Ronan handed her coffee. You're entitled to cry after armed men tried to kidnap you. My uncle really sent them. He really... Clara's voice broke again. He couldn't just let me go. He had to try to drag me back. He's desperate. Ranch is probably falling apart without you. Good. The word came out sharp and bitter. Let it fall apart. Let him lose everything. I hope he does. Ronan sat down across from her. He might. Without the water rights, he's got nothing. Clara looked up. You'd really shut off his water? Already did. Clara's eyes widened. What? While I was out hunting, rode down to the creek and closed the diversion gate. Ronan drank his coffee. Figured sending men after you meant he broke our agreement, so I broke mine. But that means his cattle start dying in about a week. Means he's got no water for the house or the workers. Means the ranch is finished unless he finds another source fast. Ronan met her eyes. And there isn't another source. Not that feeds that much land. Clara should have felt guilty, should have felt something other than the cold satisfaction spreading through her chest. He'll come himself now, she said quietly. Or send more men, worse men. Let him try. Ronan's voice was flat. I was polite before because I thought maybe he'd do the right thing. Pay you what he owes, let you live in peace. But he sent armed men into my home to take you by force. He paused. I'm done being polite. Clara looked at this man who'd dragged a chair across a barn floor for her, who'd taught her to survive, who'd just risked his life to save hers. Why do you care so much, she asked, about what happens to me? Ronan was quiet for a long moment. Because someone should. Because you deserve it. Because... He stopped. Because? Because when I look at you, I don't see what they saw. I don't see a burden or something to be ashamed of. I see someone strong who was never given a chance to be strong. Someone capable who was told she was worthless so often she believed it. He met her eyes. And I see someone worth fighting for. Clara's breath caught. Ronan, you don't have to say anything. I'm not expecting. I know this arrangement is temporary. When the money comes, you can go wherever you want. Denver, California, anywhere. His jaw tightened. But while you're here, while you're with me, nobody touches you. Nobody takes you. Not your uncle. Not those men. Nobody. Clara stood up, crossed the small space between them. Her heart was pounding. What if I don't want it to be temporary? Ronan went very still. Clara, what if I want to stay? Her voice was shaking. Not because I have nowhere else to go, not because I need protection, but because this is the first place I've ever felt like I could breathe. Because you're the first person who's ever treated me like I matter. You do matter. I know. Clara felt tears threatening again, but pushed them back. That's what I'm saying. You made me know that, and I don't want to leave. Ronan stood up slowly. You sure? This isn't an easy life, Clara. It's cold and hard and lonely. I'm not good at talking about feelings or being whatever it is women want men to be. Clara kissed him. It wasn't graceful. She'd never kissed anyone before, and she had no idea what she was doing, but Ronan went very still, and then his hands came up to cup her face, gentle despite the calluses, and he kissed her back like she was something precious. When they pulled apart, Clara's face was burning. I don't need you to be anything except yourself, she said quietly. That's enough. You're enough. Ronan rested his forehead against hers. You're the bravest person I've ever met. I'm not. You are. Don't argue with me. Clara laughed despite everything, despite the armed men and the storm and the uncertainty of what came next. She laughed and Ronan smiled, really smiled, and for a moment everything else disappeared. Then the wind hit the cabin like a fist and they both jumped. Storm's here, Ronan said. The real one. He was right. The blizzard that followed made everything before look like light flurries. For 3 days the world outside ceased to exist. The wind screamed so loud they had to shout to hear each other. Snow piled up past the windows. The cold was so brutal that frost formed on the inside walls despite the fire burning constantly. They were trapped together in the tiny cabin with nothing but each other. Clara had worried it might be awkward after the kiss, after the confession. But it wasn't. If anything, it was easier. Ronan stopped sleeping on the floor. They shared the bed now, fully clothed, just for warmth, held each other through the long nights when the cabin shook and the world tried to tear itself apart outside. During the days they talked, really talked, about everything and nothing. Ronan told her about growing up in Missouri, about joining the army at 17 because he had no family and nowhere else to go, about the battles he'd fought and the men he'd lost and the way war had carved pieces out of his soul he'd never get back. Clara told him about her mother's garden, about learning to cook at her side, about the way her father used to carry her on his shoulders and make her feel like the tallest person in the world, about the slow erosion of being unwanted, the way cruelty became normal when it was constant enough. I used to think there was something wrong with me, she said one night. Like maybe if I was prettier or smaller or quieter or louder or different somehow, they'd love me. But nothing I did was ever enough. Nothing you did was the problem. They were the problem. Ronan's arm tightened around her. Some people can't see value in anything that doesn't serve them. Your family couldn't see past their own selfishness long enough to realize what they had. What did they have? You. He said it like it was obvious. Someone who'd give everything for people who gave her nothing. That's rare, Clara. That kind of loyalty. That kind of heart. Clara felt tears slip down her cheeks. You keep saying things like that. Because they're true. My family said the opposite for so long, I almost believed them. Then I'll keep saying it until you believe me instead. On the third night, the wind finally died. They woke to silence so profound it felt unnatural. Ronan got up and opened the door. Snow had drifted halfway up the frame, but beyond it the sky was clear, stars visible for the first time in days. It's over, he said. Clara joined him at the door. The landscape was transformed, drifts taller than houses, trees bent and broken under the weight, the world buried under white. How do we even get out of here, she asked. We dig, and we wait for the snow to settle. Ronan looked at the sky. But we've got a problem. What? Those men know where we are now, and your uncle's going to be desperate. No water, ranch failing, hired guns coming back empty-handed. He turned to her. He's not going to give up, Clara. Not until he gets what he wants. which is me back under his control. Yeah. Clara looked at the pristine snow, at the mountains rising beyond, at the cabin that had become home. Then we make sure he can't take me. Ronan studied her face. What are you thinking? I'm thinking we stop waiting for him to come to us. We go to him instead. Clara's voice was steady. We end this, once and for all. You want to go back to the ranch? I want to get my money, and I want to make sure my uncle understands that I'm never coming back, that I'd rather die up here than spend another day under his roof. Clara met Ronan's eyes. Can we do that? It's risky, if he's desperate enough. He already sent armed men after me. How much worse can it get? Ronan was quiet, then, all right, we'll wait for the passes to clear. Another week, maybe 2. Then we ride down and settle this. Clara nodded. Together. Together. The week that followed was strange. Peaceful on the surface, but with tension humming underneath like a wire pulled too tight. They prepared for the confrontation, checked ammunition, repaired equipment, planned the route down, but they also existed, cooked meals together, talked by the fire, slept in the same bed, and woke tangled together in the early morning light. One evening, Clara found Ronan cleaning his rifle with intense focus. You're worried, she said. Always worry before a fight. You think it'll come to that? A fight? Ronan didn't look up. Your uncle's backed into a corner. No water, no ranch, no future. Men in that position do stupid things. Like what? Like try to take by force what they can't get any other way. He finally looked at her. I won't let him hurt you, Clara. But that might mean hurting him. You need to be prepared for that. Clara sat down across from him. He's not really my family anymore. He hasn't been for a long time. Maybe he never was. Blood doesn't make family. Care does. And they never cared. You care. Clara reached across the table and took his hand. That makes you more family than they ever were. Ronan's fingers closed around hers. I care more than I should, more than I plan to. Is that a problem? Might be. Caring makes you vulnerable, makes you hesitate when you shouldn't. He paused. But I wouldn't change it. The next morning, Clara woke to find Ronan already up, standing at the window with a tension in his shoulders she'd learned to recognize. What's wrong? Riders coming up the trail. Clara's heart jumped. She scrambled out of bed and joined him. In the distance, barely visible through the trees, she could see them. 3 horses, maybe 4. More hired guns? She asked. Don't know yet, but we're not taking chances. Ronan was already moving, loading the rifle, checking the pistol, barring the door. Get away from the windows. Clara grabbed the pistol he'd taught her to use. Her hands were steadier this time. The riders got closer. Clara could make out details now. Men in heavy coats, armed. But leading them was a figure she recognized even at this distance. Her Uncle Thomas. He came himself, she breathed. Ronan swore quietly. That's either very brave or very stupid. With my uncle, it's usually stupid. The rider stopped about 20 yards from the cabin. Thomas dismounted. He looked older than Clara remembered, thinner, defeated. Clara, his voice carried across the snow. I need to talk to you. Ronan moved to the door. You've got 1 minute before I start shooting. Talk fast. I'm here to negotiate. Nothing to negotiate. You owe Clara money. You sent men to kidnap her. You broke our agreement. Ronan's voice was cold. The water stays off until she gets every dollar. Those are the terms. I can't pay $8,000. The ranch is ruined. Should have thought of that before you spent 14 years stealing her labor. Thomas looked desperate. Clara, please, this is your family's legacy. Your mother grew up on this ranch. Your father loved that land. Are you really going to let it die? Clara felt something twist in her chest. Not guilt. She was done with guilt, but grief. For what could have been, for the family she'd wanted and never had. She walked to the door. Ronan tried to stop her, but she shook her head. Let me, she said quietly. She opened the door and stepped out into the cold. Thomas's face lit up with hope. Clara, thank God. Listen, I know things got out of hand, but we can fix this. You come home, we'll work something out. No. The hope died. No? Thomas's voice rose. Clara, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. You're the one who's not. Clara's voice was steady. You had 14 years to treat me like family, to pay me, to give me a seat at the table. You chose to treat me like unpaid labor instead. That was your choice. This is mine. I'll pay you. I'll find the money somehow. You don't have it, and even if you did, it wouldn't change anything. I'm not coming back. Thomas's face went red. You ungrateful, after everything we did for you. You did nothing for me, Clara's voice cracked. You took me in because you needed someone to work for free. You fed me scraps. You made me sit on a feed crate while you celebrated. You told your own daughter to introduce me as the housekeeper. Tears were streaming down her face now, but she didn't care. You never loved me. You never even liked me. So don't you dare stand there and talk about what you did for me. We gave you a home. You gave me a cage, and I'm done living in it. Silence fell over the clearing. Thomas looked at her like he was seeing a stranger. Maybe he was. The Clara who'd left the ranch wouldn't have shouted, wouldn't have stood her ground, wouldn't have chosen herself over family obligation, but that Clara was gone. The ranch will fail without that water, Thomas said finally. Everything our family built. Gone. Then let it go. Sell the land, move to town, find another way to live. Clara's voice gentled slightly. But leave me out of it. I'm not your solution anymore. Thomas stared at her for a long moment. Then he got back on his horse. You'll regret this, he said, when you're alone up here, when Vale gets tired of you, when winter comes and you're freezing to death in that cabin. You'll regret choosing him over your family. He's more family to me than you ever were. Thomas flinched like she'd struck him. Then he rode away, taking his hired guns with him. Clara stood in the snow watching them disappear into the trees. She was shaking, but not from cold. Ronan came up beside her, didn't speak, just stood there, solid and steady, while she processed what had just happened. I did it, Clara whispered. I really did it. You did. He's going to lose everything. That's not your fault. I know. Clara turned to look at him. I know it's not, but it still feels heavy, I know. Ronan put his arm around her shoulders. It's heavy, but you did the right thing. Clara leaned into him. What happens now? Now we wait. See if he accepts it. See if he tries one more time to change your mind. Ronan paused. And then we figure out what comes next. For us. I already know what comes next for me, Clara said. I stay here, with you. If you'll have me. Ronan turned her to face him. Clara, I'm a damaged man living in the middle of nowhere with nothing to offer but hard work and harder winters. You could take that money, when it comes, and build any life you want. Why would you choose this? Because this is the first life that's ever been mine, Clara said simply. Because you're the first person who ever made me feel like I deserved a life. Because I love you. The words hung in the cold air between them. Ronan's eyes widened. Clara, you don't have to say it back. I just needed you to know. I'm not good at this. At feelings. At saying the right things. You don't have to be good at it. Just be honest. Ronan pulled her closer. Then honestly, I love you too. Didn't plan to. Didn't think I was capable of it anymore, but I do. Clara felt something break open in her chest. Something bright and warm and terrifying. So we stay, she said. Together. Together, Ronan agreed. He kissed her there in the snow with the mountains watching and the wind starting to pick up again. And for the first time in her entire life, Clara felt like she was exactly where she belonged. Spring came slowly to the mountains, like something cautious and uncertain. The snow started melting in patches, revealing dead grass and mud underneath. Ice broke off the cabin roof in huge sheets that crashed to the ground and made Clara jump every time. The air smelled different, wet earth and pine sap instead of just cold and smoke. Clara stood outside one morning watching water drip from the eaves, listening to the sound of the creek running again after months of silence. Behind her, Ronan was repairing the winter damage to the cabin roof. She could hear him hammering, the steady rhythm of someone who'd done this 100 times before. They'd survived. The hardest winter either of them had ever faced, and they'd made it through together. You're thinking loud, Ronan called down. Clara looked up. He was balanced on the roof, silhouetted against the pale sky. Just realizing we actually did it. Had doubts? A few times, mostly in January when I couldn't feel my toes for 3 days straight. Ronan climbed down and joined her. He had a scratch across his cheek from a low branch, and his hands were covered in pitch from the repair work, but his eyes were lighter than she'd ever seen them. "Your uncle never came back," he said. "No." Clara had been thinking about that too. 6 weeks since Thomas had ridden away. No letters, no hired guns, nothing. "You think he gave up? Or the ranch finally collapsed and he had to leave? Either way, he's done." Clara waited for the guilt to hit, for the voice in her head that said she'd destroyed her family, that she was selfish, that she should have done more. But it didn't come. She just felt tired relief. "I don't miss them," she said quietly. "Is that wrong?" "No, it's honest." Ronan wiped pitch off his hands with a rag. "You gave them 14 years. They gave you nothing back. You don't owe them your grief." A rider appeared on the trail. Clara tensed automatically, but Ronan put a hand on her arm. "It's Thomas, the ranch hand." He was right. The same man who'd brought news of Sarah's wedding was riding toward them, his horse picking its way carefully over the muddy trail. Thomas dismounted when he reached them. He looked exhausted. "Miss Clara, Mr. Vale. What brings you back up here?" Ronan's voice was neutral, but Clara could feel the tension in him. Thomas reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a leather pouch, heavy from the way he handled it. "Your money," he said, offering it to Clara. "Every dollar. 8,400. Clara stared at the pouch like it might bite her. "My uncle sent you? Your uncle's gone. Left 3 weeks ago. Signed the ranch over to the bank to settle his debts and took off for California or Oregon or somewhere. Nobody knows." Thomas shifted his weight. "But before he left, he made sure this got put together, sold off everything he could, the furniture, the livestock, even his father's heirloom chair. Got your money and told me to deliver it." Clara took the pouch with shaking hands. It was heavier than she'd expected, the weight of 14 years. "Why?" she asked. "Why would he do that if he was just going to leave anyway?" Thomas shrugged. Maybe he had a moment of conscience, or maybe he just wanted to make sure Mr. Vale here didn't come after him. He looked at Ronan. "The water rights. They revert to the new owner?" "They're tied to the land, not the owner. Whoever buys the ranch from the bank gets the water access back." Thomas nodded slowly. "Then I guess everyone gets what they need eventually." He turned back to Clara. "For what it's worth, Miss Clara, I'm glad you got out. You deserve better than what they gave you." He mounted his horse and rode away before Clara could think of a response. She stood there holding the pouch, feeling the weight of it in her hands. "Open it," Ronan said quietly. Clara loosened the drawstring. Inside were bills and coins, counted and stacked and bound together. She didn't count it, didn't need to. Thomas wouldn't have brought it unless it was exact. $8,400, more money than she'd ever seen in her life. "What am I supposed to do with this?" she whispered. "Whatever you want. It's yours." Clara looked at him. "What do you want to do?" Ronan was quiet for a long moment. "I've been thinking about that, about what comes next." He gestured at the mountains around them. "I came up here to hide, to get away from people and cities and everything that reminded me of the war. And for 8 years that worked. But then you showed up and..." He stopped. And I don't want to hide anymore." Ronan met her eyes. "I don't want to spend the rest of my life in isolation pretending that's the same as peace. I want to build something, with you." Clara's heart was pounding. "Build what?" "I don't know yet, but something that matters, something that proves we survived for a reason." He took her hand. "What do you want, Clara? If you could do anything." Clara thought about the ranch, about spending 14 years cooking meals that fed 40 people, about the way food could bring people together, make them feel cared for, give them a moment of comfort in hard lives. "I want to cook," she said, "not for people who don't appreciate it, for people who need it, workers, travelers, people who are hungry and tired and just want something warm." She looked at the money in her hands. "I want to open a restaurant." Ronan smiled. "Then that's what we'll do." They left the mountains 2 weeks later. It took days to pack up the cabin, to prepare the horses, to say goodbye to the place that had saved them both. Clara kept thinking she'd feel sad leaving, but instead she felt like she was moving towards something instead of running away. They rode down through the greening valleys, past the ranch, which stood empty now, windows dark, no smoke from the chimneys, and kept going toward Denver. The city terrified Clara at first. She'd never seen so many people in one place, never heard noise that loud or constant, never smelled that particular mix of horse manure and coal smoke and humanity packed too close together. Buildings rose 3 and 4 stories high. Trains screamed through on iron rails. The streets were chaos, but underneath the chaos was opportunity. They found a small space above a dry goods store. 2 rooms, barely big enough to turn around in, but it had a kitchen area and a front room that could hold maybe 6 tables if they squeezed. The rent was $75 a month. "That's robbery," Clara said. The landlord shrugged. "That's Denver. You want it or not?" Clara looked at Ronan. He raised an eyebrow. "Your choice." "We'll take it," Clara said. They spent the next month transforming the space. Ronan built tables from salvaged lumber. Clara scrubbed the kitchen until her hands were raw. They bought secondhand dishes and mismatched silverware and a massive cast-iron stove that took 4 men to carry up the stairs. Clara spent their savings carefully, buying flour and salt and lard in bulk, dried beans, root vegetables that would keep, a few chickens for eggs, everything she needed to cook simple, filling meals. "You sure about this?" Ronan asked one night. They were sitting on the floor of the empty front room, exhausted from a day of work. "It's a lot of risk. That money could last us years if we're careful." "I'm sure." Clara leaned against his shoulder. "I spent 14 years cooking for people who didn't value it. I want to cook for people who will. What if nobody comes? Then we'll figure something else out, together." Ronan kissed the top of her head. Together. They opened the free kitchen on a Tuesday in May. Clara had been too nervous to sleep the night before. She'd checked her supplies a dozen times, cleaned surfaces that were already clean, practiced her greeting in the mirror until Ronan told her to stop. "You're ready," he said. "Trust yourself." The first customer was a railroad worker. Big guy, probably 50, with hands like shovels and clothes covered in coal dust. He looked at the menu Clara had written on a slate board, beans and cornbread, stew, coffee, and grunted. "How much?" 15 cents for beans and cornbread, 25 for the stew, coffee's 5 cents. He counted out coins. Stew. Clara's hands were shaking as she ladled it into a bowl. She'd made this stew 1,000 times, but suddenly everything felt precarious. What if it was terrible? What if he hated it? What if this whole thing was a mistake? The man took one bite, then another. Then he started eating faster. When he finished, he set down the bowl and looked at Clara for the first time. "That's good food, ma'am. Real good." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you. You open tomorrow?" "Every day?" "I'll be back." He left 30 cents on the table. Clara stared at the extra nickel. "He tipped you," Ronan said from the kitchen doorway. "He tipped me," Clara repeated, wonder in her voice. More customers came. Not a flood, they didn't have the reputation yet, but a steady trickle. Workers who'd heard about the new place, travelers passing through, people who were hungry and tired and just wanted something warm, exactly like Clara had imagined. She cooked until her feet ached and her back screamed. Ronan handled everything else, taking orders, clearing tables, managing supplies, keeping the books. They fell into a rhythm, moving around each other in the small space like dancers who'd practiced the steps 1,000 times. By the end of the first week, they'd made back the month's rent. By the end of the first month, there was a line outside the door at lunch. "We need to expand," Ronan said one evening. They were counting the day's earnings, more than they'd ever made in a single day at the cabin. "We're turning people away. We can't afford a bigger space yet. What if we hired help, someone to assist in the kitchen, free you up to cook more?" Clara thought about that, about having another person in her space, about trusting someone else with the food. "All right," she said finally, "but I choose who?" The woman who answered their advertisement was named Mary. Late 30s, thin, with nervous eyes and hands that wouldn't stop moving. She'd worked in kitchens before but kept getting fired because, as she put it, "I'm too much trouble." "What kind of trouble?" Clara asked. "The kind where I'm too fat and too loud and too opinionated for most bosses." Mary lifted her chin. "But I work hard and I know my way around a stove. You want references? I can get them. You want someone quiet who'll stay invisible? I'm not your girl." Clara hired her on the spot. Mary fit into the kitchen like she'd been there all along. She was fast, efficient, and she didn't flinch when Clara got stressed and snapped. She just snapped back and kept working. "You're good at this." Mary said one afternoon. They were prepping for the dinner rush. The cooking, but also the managing. You ever run a kitchen before? I ran a ranch kitchen for 14 years. Nobody noticed. Mary looked at her. Their loss, our gain. 2 months later, they hired 2 more women. Alice, who'd been abandoned by her husband and needed work. Ruth, who was too old to get hired anywhere else but could chop vegetables faster than anyone Clara had ever seen. The free kitchen became something more than a restaurant. It became a place where women who'd been discarded could prove they weren't worthless, where hard work was noticed and valued, where mistakes weren't met with cruelty but with patience and correction. Clara paid them fair wages, fed them good meals, treated them like they mattered, and they transformed the business. Within 6 months, the free kitchen had outgrown the space above the dry goods store. They moved to a larger location on a busier street. More tables, better equipment, a real sign outside with painted letters. Clara stood across the street one evening looking at the restaurant. Light spilled from the windows. She could see Mary through the glass, laughing at something Alice said, could hear the sounds of conversation and clinking dishes and life. Ronan came up beside her. "You did this?" he said quietly. "We did this." "No, this is you, Clara. Your vision, your work. I just helped." Clara leaned against him. "I keep waiting for it to fall apart, for someone to come take it away." "Nobody's taking anything. You earned this." Ronan paused. "Actually, I've been thinking about that, about making sure nobody can take it." "What do you mean?" He pulled a folded document from his pocket. "I had a lawyer draw this up. Transfers full ownership of the business to you, your name only, so if anything happens to me, it's still yours." Clara took the paper with shaking hands. "Ronan, you built this. You should own it. Completely." He met her eyes. "I don't want you to ever feel trapped again. Not by me. Not by anyone." Clara felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "You're not trapping me. You've never trapped me." "I know, but I want you to know you could leave if you wanted. That you have something that's entirely yours. That your future doesn't depend on me or anyone else." Clara kissed him there on the street with people walking past and the evening crowd starting to gather at their restaurant. "I don't want to leave," she said. "I want to build this with you, but thank you for understanding why that matters." The business kept growing. By the end of the first year, the Free Kitchen was one of the most popular restaurants in Denver. They'd expanded twice more. Now employed 15 women, served hundreds of meals a day. Clara had gone from invisible to unavoidable. Newspapers wrote about the restaurant, about the former ranch cook who'd built something from nothing, about the unusual business model of hiring women other restaurants wouldn't touch. Not everyone approved. "You're running a charity, not a business," one competitor told her. "You'll never turn a real profit hiring misfits." "Those misfits made us $3,200 last month," Clara said calmly. "How'd you do?" The man had no answer, but the criticism stung more than Clara wanted to admit. Late at night, when the restaurant was closed and she was tallying the books, she'd hear her uncle's voice. "You're not smart enough. You're not capable enough. You'll fail." "You're doing it again," Ronan said one night. He'd found her at the kitchen table staring at the ledger without seeing it. "Doing what?" "Listening to ghosts, people who aren't even here anymore." He sat down across from her. "Clara, look at these numbers. Really look at them. You're not failing. You're succeeding beyond anything we imagined." "But what if it doesn't last? What if the sun doesn't rise tomorrow? What if the mountains fall down? What if any of 1,000 impossible things happen?" Ronan reached across and closed the ledger. "You can't live your whole life waiting for disaster. Sometimes you have to accept that good things can last." Clara wanted to believe him. The second year was harder than the first. A larger restaurant opened 2 blocks away with fancier food and lower prices. They were clearly trying to run Clara out of business. Several of her regular customers stopped coming. Clara panicked, started working longer hours, pushed herself and her staff harder, tried to do everything herself instead of delegating. Mary finally cornered her in the kitchen. "You keep this up, you're going to collapse," Mary said bluntly. "And then where will we all be?" "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You look like death." "When's the last time you slept more than 4 hours?" Clara couldn't remember. "This is what you're good at," Mary continued. "Teaching us, leading us, making this place special. You're not good at doing everything alone. That's not a weakness, Clara. It's just reality. But if I don't, then we do. That's what you hired us for. Let us help. It went against every instinct Clara had developed over 22 years of being the only person she could rely on. But she forced herself to step back, to let Mary handle the kitchen some days, to let Alice manage the books, to let Ruth train new hires. And the restaurant didn't fall apart. If anything, it got stronger. The women Clara had hired weren't just employees, they were invested. They cared about the free kitchen succeeding because it had given them something they thought they'd never have: a chance. The competing restaurant closed after 8 months, couldn't match the quality or the loyalty Clara had built. By the 3rd year, they were opening a second location. Clara stood in the empty space that would become the new restaurant, trying to take it all in. 3 years ago, she'd been eating scraps on a feed crate. Now she owned 2 restaurants and employed 23 people. "You're crying," Ronan observed. "I'm overwhelmed." Clara wiped her eyes. "How did this happen? You worked for it, you earned it, you built something that matters." He pulled her close. "And you're going to keep building. I can see it in your eyes. This isn't enough for you yet." He was right. Clara already had ideas for a 3rd location, for a training program, for a way to help even more women who'd been discarded by a world that couldn't see their value. But that night, she let herself just be grateful for what they'd already accomplished. They went home to the small apartment they'd rented above the original restaurant. It wasn't fancy. 2 rooms, barely decorated, with furniture they'd bought secondhand. But it was theirs. Nobody could take it away. Clara cooked dinner while Ronan read the newspaper. Normal, domestic, the kind of evening she'd dreamed about during those long winters in the mountains. "There's something I want to ask you," Ronan said suddenly. Clara looked up from the stove. "What?" He set down the paper. "Marry me." Clara's heart stopped. "What?" "Marry me. Make this official. Let me spend the rest of my life watching you prove everyone who ever doubted you completely wrong." "Ronan, I don't have a ring. I'm not getting down on one knee. I'm just asking." He met her eyes. "You've given me a reason to be part of the world again. Let me give you my name, my future, everything I have." Clara felt tears streaming down her face. "Yes. Yes? Yes. I'll marry you, you stubborn mountain man." Ronan crossed the room and kissed her. Clara kissed him back, tasting salt from her own tears and smoke from the stove, and the familiar taste of coffee they both drank too much of. When they pulled apart, she was smiling. "We're going to have to plan a wedding," she said. "Nothing fancy, just us and whoever you want there." Clara thought about that, about her staff, who'd become more like sisters than employees, about the customers who'd become friends, about building something that mattered with people who mattered. "I want Mary to be there, and Alice and Ruth, and anyone else from the restaurant who wants to come. Then that's what we'll do." They got married on a Sunday in September. No church. Neither of them was religious. Just a simple ceremony in the park with a judge officiating and 25 women from the free kitchen watching. Clara wore a dress she'd bought specifically for the occasion. Dark blue, practical, nothing fancy. Ronan wore his best clothes, which weren't that much better than his everyday clothes. But Clara didn't care. Mary cried through the whole ceremony. Alice made a speech about how Clara had saved her life. Ruth baked a cake that was slightly lopsided but tasted perfect. And when the judge pronounced them married, Clara looked at Ronan and realized that the girl who'd been afraid to take up space had somehow become a woman who took up exactly the right amount. The 4th year brought challenges Clara hadn't anticipated. A health inspector tried to shut them down over violations Clara knew were fabricated. A supplier doubled his prices overnight. One of their cooks quit suddenly, leaving them short-staffed during the busiest season. But they survived each crisis the same way they'd survived everything else. Together. Clara learned to fight back when threatened, to negotiate harder, to trust her instincts even when people told her she was wrong. And slowly, the business stabilized. They opened the 3rd location, then a 4th. The free kitchen became a Denver institution, the place where you could get good food at a fair price served by women who actually cared whether you enjoyed your meal. Clara started getting offers from investors, people who wanted to expand the concept to other cities, to franchise the name, to turn the free kitchen into something bigger than she'd ever imagined. "What do you think?" she asked Ronan one night. They were in bed, exhausted from another long day. Should we expand outside Denver? Is that what you want? I don't know. Part of me wants to see how far this can go, but part of me is terrified of losing control, of it becoming something else. Ronan was quiet for a moment. What made the free kitchen work wasn't the food. It was you. The way you treat people, the way you build them up instead of tearing them down. If you can't maintain that as it grows, maybe it's not worth growing. Clara thought about that. So we stay small. Or we grow carefully, only expand to places where you can maintain the culture, where the women you hire feel valued instead of exploited. That's slower, less profitable, but more sustainable, and more true to why you started this in the first place. Clara rolled over to face him. When did you get so wise about business? I'm not wise. I just know you, and I know you'd rather build something meaningful than something massive. He was right. Clara turned down the investors. Instead, she focused on making each location as good as it could be, on training managers who understood her vision, on creating a system where women could advance based on merit instead of connections or appearance. By the 5th year, the Free Kitchen had 6 locations across Colorado. Clara employed 73 women, served thousands of meals a week, made enough profit that she could finally exhale without worrying about next month's rent. She'd built exactly what she'd imagined that day in the mountains when Ronan had asked what she wanted. A place where hard work mattered, where women who'd been invisible could be seen, where food was served with dignity instead of condescension. One evening, Clara was working late at the original location. Most of the staff had gone home, but she'd stayed to review applications for a new position. She'd gotten 37 responses, all women, all desperate for a chance. Clara read through each one carefully. Single mothers, widows, women who'd been abandoned, women who were too old or too heavy or too scarred to get hired anywhere else. Women like her. She'd have to choose just one. But reading their stories, she kept thinking about the feed crate, about sitting alone while everyone else celebrated, about how one person's kindness, Ronan dragging that chair across the floor, had changed her entire life. What if she could be that person for someone else? Clara made a note to expand their hiring, to create more positions, to give more women the chance she'd been given. Because if there was one thing Clara had learned in 5 years of running the Free Kitchen, it was this. There was always room at the table for one more person who deserved a seat. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in late October. Clara was in the kitchen of the main restaurant, teaching 2 new hires how to make the beef stew that had become their signature dish. The mail carrier knocked and handed Mary a stack of envelopes. Mary sorted through them, bills, supplier invoices, an advertisement for new ovens, and then stopped. Clara, she said quietly, this one's from Wyoming. The kitchen went silent. Clara wiped her hands on her apron and took the envelope. The handwriting was unfamiliar, shaky, old. She opened it slowly. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a smaller sealed envelope. The letter read, Miss Clara Whitmore Vale. Your Uncle Thomas died 3 weeks ago in Sacramento. Before he passed, he gave me this letter to send to you if anything happened to him. He made me promise. I'm keeping that promise. Martha Hayes, neighbor. Clara's hands were trembling as she opened the second envelope. Her uncle's handwriting this time, familiar in a way that made her stomach turn. Clara, it began. No pleasantries, no apology for how it started. I'm dying. The doctors say maybe a month, maybe less. I'm writing this because I need you to know something before I go. The ranch is gone. Sold it to cover debts I'd been hiding for years. Your Aunt Margaret left me 6 months after you did. Moved back east with her sister. Sarah's marriage fell apart within a year. Ethan drinks more than I ever did. The family destroyed itself exactly like you probably knew it would. But that's not why I'm writing. I need you to understand that you were never the burden. You were the backbone. You held everything together, and we were too stupid and too proud to see it. I convinced myself that giving you a roof and food was enough. That you owed us your labor because we'd taken you in. But the truth is, we took everything from you and gave back nothing. I was ashamed of you. I'm not proud of that, but it's true. You were overweight and quiet, and you made me feel guilty every time I looked at you because I knew we were using you. So I pushed you further away, made you sit on that feed crate, let the family treat you like you didn't matter. Because if you didn't matter, I didn't have to feel guilty about what we were doing. Then that mountain man walked in and dragged my father's chair across the floor, and I saw what we'd become. What I'd become. A man who could watch his own niece eat scraps alone and convince himself it was acceptable. You were right to leave. Right to take the money. Right to never look back. I thought about coming to Denver to find you, to apologize in person, but I was too much of a coward. Still am, I guess. So I'm writing this instead. You deserved better than what we gave you, Clara. You deserved a family that loved you, a home where you belonged, a life where you didn't have to apologize for existing. I'm sorry we couldn't be that for you. I'm sorry I couldn't be better. I heard about your restaurants, about what you've built, about the women you're helping. I'm glad you found something that matters. I'm glad you found someone who sees your worth. I hope you're happy. I hope you've forgiven yourself for leaving, even though there was nothing to forgive. And if you can find it in yourself someday to forgive me, I'd be grateful. But I don't expect it. I don't deserve it. This is goodbye, Clara. I'm sorry it took dying for me to say what I should have said 14 years ago. You were never worthless. You were extraordinary. We just couldn't see it. Your uncle, Thomas Whitmore. Clara read the letter twice, then a third time. The words blurred as tears filled her eyes. Clara? Mary's voice was gentle. You all right? Clara set the letter down. My uncle died. The room shifted. The new hires looked uncomfortable. Mary came closer. I'm sorry, Mary said. Don't be. Clara wiped her eyes. He wasn't a good man. He spent most of my life making me feel worthless, but he... Her voice broke. He finally admitted it. Finally said I wasn't the problem. Of course you weren't the problem. I know that now. But there was still this small part of me that wondered, that thought maybe if I'd been different, better, thinner, prettier, they would have loved me. Clara touched the letter. This is him saying it wasn't me. It was always them. Mary pulled Clara into a tight hug. It was always them, she repeated firmly. Always. Clara let herself cry for a few minutes. Not for her uncle. She'd mourned that relationship years ago. But for the girl she'd been. The one who'd believed she deserved scraps. Who'd apologized for breathing. Who'd thought love was something you had to earn through perfect behavior and endless sacrifice. That girl was finally, completely, laid to rest. When Clara pulled away, she folded the letter carefully and put it in her pocket. Back to work, she said. We've got lunch service in an hour. Mary studied her face. You sure? I'm sure. The best revenge is living well. And we're living very well. That evening, Clara showed Ronan the letter. He read it in silence while they sat at the kitchen table in their apartment. When he finished, he set it down and looked at her. How do you feel? Relieved, mostly. Like I've been carrying something heavy for years and I can finally put it down. Clara traced the edge of the paper. He admitted it. That's more than I thought I'd ever get. Does it change anything? No, but it helps. She met Ronan's eyes. I don't forgive him. Not completely. He had 14 years to do better, and he only felt bad when it was too late to matter. But at least he recognized what he did was wrong. That's something. Ronan reached across the table and took her hand. You don't owe him forgiveness. I know, but I think I'm going to give it to him anyway. Not for his sake, for mine. So I can finally close that door completely. They sat in silence for a while, hands linked, as the sun set outside the window. You want to go back? Ronan asked finally. To Wyoming? See the ranch one last time? Clara thought about that. The ranch where she'd grown up. Where she'd been invisible. Where she'd eaten scraps on a feed crate while her family celebrated without her. No, she said. That place doesn't exist anymore. The ranch is gone. The family's scattered. There's nothing left to see except ghosts. She squeezed his hand. My home is here. With you. With the restaurants. With the life we've built. Ronan brought her hand to his lips and kissed it. Then that's where we stay. 2 weeks later, Clara was reviewing applications for a new location they were opening in Colorado Springs. She'd gotten almost 60 responses, all women, all desperate, all hoping the free kitchen would be the place that finally gave them a chance. One application caught her eye. Emma Richardson, age 24. Experience? None. References? None. Why do you want to work at the free kitchen? I need someone to see me as more than my body. I'm overweight, and people treat me like I'm invisible or disgusting. I'm tired of apologizing for existing. I heard the free kitchen is different. I hope that's true." Clara stared at the words. They could have been written by her 8 years ago. She called Emma in for an interview. The young woman who walked into Clara's office was heavy-set, nervous, and wearing clothes that were clearly meant to hide her body. She kept her eyes down, spoke quietly, apologized 3 times in the first 2 minutes for taking up Clara's time. Clara recognized every single behavior. "Emma," she said gently, "look at me." Emma raised her eyes. They were red-rimmed like she'd been crying recently. "I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to really hear it," Clara continued. "You don't have to apologize for being here. You don't have to make yourself small. You don't have to hide." She paused. "The world has probably spent your whole life telling you that you take up too much space. The world is wrong." Emma's lip trembled. "You don't know what it's like." "I do." Clara stood up and came around the desk. 8 years ago, I was sitting on a feed crate eating cold scraps while my family celebrated with food I'd cooked. I was 22 years old, and I believed I deserved to be invisible, that my worth was measured by how little space I could occupy. She met Emma's eyes. "I was wrong, and so are you." "How do you know?" "Because you're here. You applied. You asked for a chance. That takes courage." Clara sat down in the chair next to Emma instead of behind the desk. "I'm going to hire you, Emma, not because I feel sorry for you, but because I see something in you that you don't see in yourself yet. Strength, determination, the capacity to be so much more than the world has told you you're allowed to be." Emma started crying. "Why are you being so nice to me?" "Because 8 years ago, a stranger walked into a barn and treated me with more dignity in 5 minutes than my family had given me in 14 years. He didn't save me, I saved myself. But he showed me I was worth saving." Clara handed Emma a handkerchief. "I'm just passing it forward." Emma wiped her eyes. "I don't know anything about restaurant work. Neither did I when I started." "You'll learn." Clara stood up. "Be here Monday morning at 6. Bring comfortable shoes. The work is hard, but the people are kind. And Emma?" "Yes?" "You're going to stop apologizing for existing, starting now. Understand?" Emma nodded, a small smile breaking through the tears. After Emma left, Clara sat at her desk and thought about the girl she'd been, about all the years spent believing she was the problem, about how one moment of unexpected kindness had cracked that belief just enough for her to imagine something different. She thought about Ronan dragging that chair across the floor, about refusing to let her eat alone, about seeing her when no one else would. That moment had changed everything. Not because Ronan had rescued her, but because he'd shown her she was worth rescuing herself. Now it was her turn to be that person for someone else. The Colorado Springs location opened 6 weeks later. Clara hired Emma as one of the first staff members, also hired 3 other women who'd been rejected everywhere else they'd applied. Built the same culture she'd built in Denver: hard work, fair pay, dignity, respect. The opening was chaos. Equipment broke, suppliers were late. The stove caught fire twice in the first week, but they survived it the same way they'd survived everything else. Together. Emma turned out to be a natural in the kitchen, fast learner, dedicated. And once she stopped apologizing for taking up space, she discovered she had opinions, strong ones, about how things should be done. "You're bossy," Mary observed one day. She said it with approval. "Is that a problem?" Emma asked. "Hell no. Bossy women get things done. Keep it up." Watching Emma transform reminded Clara of her own journey. The girl who'd walked into the interview barely able to meet Clara's eyes was becoming someone who could run a kitchen shift by herself, who could train new hires, who could stand up for herself when customers were rude. It wasn't a smooth transformation. Emma still had bad days, days when she believed the voice in her head that said she was worthless, days when she wanted to hide, but Clara recognized those days, and she always knew exactly what to say. "Bad day?" she asked once, finding Emma crying in the storage room. "Customer called me a fat cow, said I was disgusting, that he couldn't believe I worked around food." Clara's jaw tightened. "Which customer?" "Don't. It's not worth it." "It's absolutely worth it. Nobody talks to my staff that way." Clara headed for the dining room. The customer was still there, middle-aged man, well-dressed, smug expression. Sir, Clara said calmly, Obese, you need to leave. Excuse me? You insulted one of my employees. You're not welcome here anymore. The man's face went red. I'm a paying customer. Not anymore. Get out. You can't throw me out for stating facts. I can throw you out for being cruel, for making another human being feel worthless because it makes you feel powerful, for bringing your ugliness into my restaurant and trying to disguise it as honesty. Clara's voice was steel. So get out, now, before I have you escorted. The man stood up, sputtering. You'll regret this. I'll tell everyone about this place. Good. Tell them we don't tolerate cruelty. Tell them we value our staff more than we value bullies with money. Tell them the free kitchen is a place where kindness matters more than commerce. Clara opened the door. Now leave. He left, still muttering threats. Clara turned back to find Emma standing in the kitchen doorway, staring. You didn't have to do that, Emma said quietly. Yes, I did. Nobody gets to treat you that way. Not in my restaurant. Not anywhere if I can help it. Clara put a hand on Emma's shoulder. You're worth defending, Emma. Don't ever forget that. That night, Clara told Ronan what had happened. You threw out a paying customer, he said. Not a question. I did. Good. Ronan smiled. The money's not worth it if you have to compromise who you are to get it. Clara leaned against him. They were sitting on their balcony, watching the Denver streets below. 8 years ago, she'd been in a mountain cabin wondering if she'd survive the winter. Now she was watching a city that knew her name, running a business that mattered, married to a man who saw her worth. Do you ever miss it? She asked. The mountains, the quiet, the simplicity. Sometimes, but I wouldn't trade this. He gestured at the city. I spent 8 years hiding from the world, convinced that isolation was the same as peace. But it wasn't peace, it was just fear, dressed up as self-reliance. What changed? You. Walking away from everything you knew took more courage than I'd shown in years. Made me realize that hiding isn't brave. Building something despite being afraid, that's brave. He kissed the top of her head. You taught me that. Clara turned to look at him. I think we taught each other. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set and the city lights came on one by one. The years continued. The free kitchen expanded to 8 locations, then 10, then 12. Clara stopped counting after 15. Each new restaurant followed the same model. Hire women who'd been discarded. Pay them fairly. Treat them with dignity. Build something that mattered. It wasn't always easy. They had setbacks, locations that failed, staff who didn't work out, competitors who tried to undercut them, economic downturns that threatened everything they'd built. But they survived each crisis the same way they'd survived the mountain winter, together, with determination and honesty, and the willingness to adapt. Clara was 35 when she realized she'd built something bigger than restaurants. She was at the main Denver location talking to a young woman who'd been working there for 6 months. The woman, Sarah, though not Clara's cousin, had just gotten promoted to assistant manager. She was crying. I never thought I'd be worth promoting, Sarah said. I've been fired from every other job I've had. Told I was too stupid, too slow, too much trouble. You're none of those things, Clara said firmly. You're smart and capable, and you earned this promotion. But why did you give me a chance when nobody else would? Clara thought about that question, about feed crates and mountain cabins, and the long journey from invisible to invaluable. Because someone gave me a chance when I needed it most, she said finally, and because I remember what it feels like to be told you're worthless so many times you start to believe it. I can't change what happened to you before, but I can change what happens to you now. Sarah wiped her eyes. Thank you for seeing me. After Sarah left, Clara stood in the restaurant and looked around. The dinner rush was starting, tables filling up, her staff moving with practiced efficiency, customers from every walk of life sharing space and meals and conversation. This was what she'd built. Not just restaurants, but a place where people who'd been invisible could be seen, where hard work was rewarded, where kindness was valued as much as profit. A place where everyone got a seat at the table. 10 years after leaving the ranch, Clara got another letter from Wyoming. This one was from her cousin Sarah, the real one. Dear Clara, it began, I know I have no right to contact you after how we treated you, but I wanted you to know that you were right about everything. My marriage fell apart. The ranch is gone, the family scattered, And I've spent the last 10 years working jobs that treated me like I was replaceable and worthless. Jobs where I finally understood what we did to you. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted to apologize. For every cruel word. For every time we made you feel less than. For sitting at that table while you ate alone on a feed crate and telling myself it was acceptable. I heard about the free kitchen, about what you've built. I'm happy for you. You deserve better than we gave you, and I'm glad you found it. I'm working as a seamstress in Portland now. It's honest work, and I'm grateful to have it. I'm not the person I was 10 years ago. I hope you're not either. Take care of yourself, Clara. You were always better than the rest of us. Your cousin, Sarah. Clara read the letter twice, then set it aside. Another apology, Ronan observed. Yeah. Clara poured herself coffee. Seems like everyone wants to apologize now that they've faced consequences. You going to forgive her? Clara thought about it. About young Sarah wrinkling her nose as Clara passed. About being introduced as the housekeeper. About all the small cruelties that had added up to 14 years of pain. I don't know, she said honestly. Part of me wants to hold on to the anger. It feels justified, deserved. She paused. But another part of me remembers being 22 and terrified and convinced I was worthless. If someone had offered me a way out back then, I would have taken it. Sarah's doing the work now. Maybe that's enough. You don't owe her forgiveness. I know. But I think I might give it to her anyway. Not for her, for me. So I can finally let all of it go completely, Clara wrote back. A short letter, acknowledged the apology. Wished Sarah well. Didn't offer a relationship, but didn't slam the door completely either. Because the truth was, Clara had learned something in 10 years of running the free kitchen. People could change. Not easily. Not without work. But it was possible. And sometimes giving someone a chance to prove they'd changed was the bravest thing you could do. Clara was 40 when she and Ronan made the trip back to the mountains. Not to the ranch. That had been sold and resold, turned into something unrecognizable. But to the cabin where they'd survived that first brutal winter together. It was still there, weathered and worn but standing. They'd kept ownership of the land, visited occasionally over the years, made basic repairs to keep it from falling apart completely. They spent a week there. No restaurants to run, no staff to manage, no deadlines or deliveries or decisions, just the two of them and the quiet and the mountains that had saved them both. One evening they sat outside watching the sunset paint the sky impossible colors. Do you ever regret it, Clara asked, leaving this place, the quiet? Ronan was quiet for a long moment. Sometimes I miss the simplicity, but I don't regret building something that matters more than my own comfort. He looked at her. What about you? Do you regret leaving the ranch? Not even for a second. Clara smiled. That girl who sat on the feed crate, she's gone. And I'm grateful for that. She's not entirely gone. She's still in there, in the way you see women like Emma, the way you recognize pain in people who are good at hiding it. Maybe, but she's not in charge anymore. Clara leaned against him. You know what the best part is? About everything we've built? What? It's ours. Nobody can take it away. Nobody can make me feel small again. I own my own life now, completely. Ronan pulled her closer. You always owned it. You just didn't know it yet. They stayed in the mountains for another few days, then rode back down to Denver, to the restaurants, to the staff who'd become family, to the life they'd built from nothing but determination and each other. Clara was 45 when she hired her 100th woman. She made a small ceremony of it, gathered all the staff she could at the main location, introduced the new hire, a widow named Margaret who'd been rejected from 37 jobs before the free kitchen said yes. Margaret makes 100, Clara announced. 100 women who've been told they weren't good enough, weren't young enough, weren't pretty enough, weren't thin enough, weren't anything enough. She paused. But they were all enough for us, and now they're proving every day that the world was wrong. The staff applauded. Margaret was crying. Clara handed her a handkerchief, the same one she'd given Emma years ago, the same one she'd been given by Ronan in the mountain cabin. After the ceremony, Mary pulled Clara aside. You did it, Mary said simply. You built exactly what you said you'd build, a place where women like us matter. We built it, Clara corrected. This was never just me. No, but you started it. You had the vision. The rest of us just helped make it real. Mary smiled. The girl on the feed crate became the woman who owns the table. That's a hell of a journey. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. It's not over yet. No, but it's pretty damn good so far. That evening, Clara and Ronan were closing up the main restaurant. Everyone else had gone home. Just the two of them moving through the familiar routine of cleaning up, counting the register, preparing for tomorrow. Ronan was wiping down tables. Clara was doing inventory. Comfortable silence between them. You're thinking loud again, Ronan observed. Clara smiled. Just thinking about how far we've come. From that barn to this. Regrets? None. You? Not a single one, he set down the rag. Although I do have one question. What's that? If you could go back and talk to that girl on the feed crate, the one who thought she deserved scraps, what would you tell her? Clara thought about that. About 22-year-old Clara, invisible and afraid. About the years of believing she was worthless. About that moment when Ronan had dragged the chair across the floor and everything had changed. I'd tell her she's braver than she knows, stronger than she feels, worth so much more than anyone has told her. Clara's voice was soft. I'd tell her that leaving will be the hardest thing she ever does, but staying would be harder, that choosing herself isn't selfish, it's survival. Would she believe you? Probably not. Not at first. But maybe it would plant a seed. Maybe it would help her walk away a little sooner. Clara looked at Ronan. What would you tell yourself? Back when you were hiding in the mountains? That isolation isn't peace. That building something with someone you love is worth the risk of being hurt. That you can survive war, but you have to choose to really live afterward. He crossed the room to her. And I'd tell myself to drag that chair across the floor without hesitating, because that moment changed everything. Clara wrapped her arms around him. It did change everything. They stood there in the empty restaurant, holding each other, surrounded by the life they'd built from nothing but courage and each other. Outside, the city continued, people walking past the windows, lives being lived, stories being written. And inside the free kitchen, two people who'd saved each other stood in the quiet and knew exactly how lucky they were. 23 years after walking away from the ranch, Clara stood in the main Denver location watching the dinner service with Ronan beside her. She was 65 now, still working, still building, still helping women who reminded her of herself. The restaurant was packed, every table full, staff moving with practiced efficiency, the sound of conversation and laughter and life. A young woman sat alone at a corner table, heavy-set, quiet, picking at her food with the air of someone who'd been told she didn't deserve to take up space. Clara watched her for a moment, recognized every gesture, every unconscious movement designed to make herself smaller. She crossed the room and sat down across from the young woman. Hi, Clara said gently. I'm Clara. I own this place. The young woman looked up, startled. Did I do something wrong? No, nothing wrong. I just noticed you were eating alone and thought you might like company. Oh, I'm used to eating alone. It's fine. Is it though? Clara asked. Or is it just familiar? The young woman's eyes widened slightly. I used to sit alone too. Spent 14 years eating scraps while everyone else celebrated. Convinced myself I preferred it. Clara smiled. I was lying to myself, and I think maybe you are too. Tears welled up in the young woman's eyes. How did you know? Because I remember what it looks like. That particular kind of invisible. Clara reached across the table. Can I tell you something? You don't have to be invisible. You don't have to earn the right to be seen. You just have to decide you're worth seeing. I don't know how to do that. Start small. Start by sitting at a table instead of hiding in corners. Start by taking up space without apologizing. Start by believing that you deserve to be here just as much as anyone else. Clara paused. And if you need help learning how, we're hiring. The pay is fair, the work is hard, but you'll be valued every single day. The young woman stared at her. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you a chance. What you do with it is up to you. Clara stood up and pulled a business card from her pocket, set it on the table. Think about it. Come by tomorrow if you're interested. Ask for Clara. She smiled. And finish your dinner. You paid for it. You deserve to enjoy it. As Clara walked away, Ronan was waiting near the kitchen. Another one? He asked quietly. Another one, Clara confirmed. "You're going to hire every woman who reminds you of yourself." "Probably. Is that a problem?" Ronan smiled and wrapped his arm around her waist. "Not even a little bit." They stood together watching the restaurant operate, watching the staff they'd hired and trained move through their shifts with confidence and skill, watching customers from every walk of life share space and meals, watching proof that kindness could be a business model, that dignity could be profitable, that seeing people who'd been invisible could change the world, one person at a time. "Still glad you dragged that chair across the floor?" Clara asked. Ronan pulled her closer. "Best decision I ever made." "Second best," Clara corrected. "First was loving me." Those were the same decision. Clara looked up at him. After 23 years of marriage, she still saw the same steady devotion in his eyes, the same certainty that she was worth fighting for. "I love you," she said. "I love you too." He kissed the top of her head. "Ready to go home?" "In a minute. I want to see if she comes back." They waited. Watched the young woman at the corner table finish her meal. Watched her pick up the business card, turn it over in her hands. Watched her slip it into her pocket before leaving. Clara smiled. Maybe she'd come back tomorrow. Maybe she wouldn't. Either way, Clara had planted the seed, had shown another invisible woman that being seen was possible. That was enough. That night, in the apartment above the original restaurant, Clara and Ronan sat at their kitchen table. The same table where they'd shared 1,000 meals, made 1,000 decisions, built a life neither of them had imagined possible. "You know what I realized today?" Clara said. "What's that?" "I spent the first 22 years of my life trying to make myself smaller, trying to disappear, trying to deserve scraps." She looked around the apartment, at the life they'd built. "And I've spent the last 23 years helping other women realize they don't have to do that they're allowed to take up space, that they deserve seats at tables." "You changed a lot of lives, Clara. We changed them. Together." She reached across the table and took his hand. "I couldn't have done any of this without you, without that moment in the barn when you refused to let me be invisible. I didn't do much, just dragged a chair and sat down. You did everything. You saw me when no one else would. You treated me like I mattered when I didn't believe I did. You gave me a choice when I thought I had none." Clara's voice was thick with emotion. "You saved my life, Ronan. Not by rescuing me, by showing me I could rescue myself." Ronan stood up and pulled her into his arms. "And you saved mine. Gave me a reason to stop hiding, to build instead of run, to believe that broken people can still create beautiful things." They held each other in the quiet apartment. Two people who'd been invisible and damaged and convinced they were worthless, who'd somehow built a life that proved all of that wrong. The young woman from the restaurant came back the next morning. Clara hired her on the spot. Her name was Anna. She was 24. She'd spent her whole life being told she was too fat, too quiet, too much trouble. She cried when Clara offered her the job. "Why are you being so nice to me?" Anna asked through tears. Clara smiled. "Because 23 years ago, I sat on a feed crate eating cold scraps while my family celebrated without me. I thought I deserved it. Thought I deserved to be invisible. What changed? Someone showed me I didn't. Someone gave me a chance to be seen, to matter, to build a life where I didn't have to apologize for breathing." Clara handed Anna a uniform. "Now it's my turn to be that person for you." Anna started the next day. Within 6 months, she was running her own shift. Within a year, she was assistant manager. Within 2 years, she was helping train new hires who reminded her of the person she'd been. The cycle continued. Women who'd been invisible became visible. Women who'd been told they were worthless proved their worth. Women who'd eaten scraps built tables of their own. And at the center of it all was Clara, still working, still building, still seeing people who needed to be seen. 10 years later, Clara was 75. She'd officially retired from day-to-day operations 5 years earlier, though she still visited the restaurants regularly, still talked to new hires, still made sure the culture she'd built remained intact. Ronan was 78, moving slower now but still sharp, still devoted, still the foundation Clara built everything on. They were sitting in the mountain cabin. They came up every summer now, spending weeks in the quiet, remembering where they'd started. "Emma's taking over the Denver locations," Clara said. She was reading a letter from her former protege. "She wants to expand the training program, help more women." "What do you think?" I think she'll do it better than I did. She understands what these women need because she was one of them. Clara set down the letter. The business doesn't need me anymore. It's bigger than me now. That's exactly what I wanted. Ronan smiled. You built something that will outlast you. Not many people can say that. We built it. I helped. But this was your vision, your heart, your refusal to let women be invisible just because the world couldn't see their value. Clara looked out of the mountains, at the peaks where she'd learned to survive, where she'd fallen in love, where she'd discovered she was worth more than scraps. Do you ever think about how different things would be if you hadn't walked into that barn? She asked. Every day, but I try not to dwell on it. I'd rather focus on what did happen, on the life we built. Me too. Clara reached for his hand. No regrets? Not a single one. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set behind the mountains. Clara was 82 when she wrote her final letter to the women of the free kitchen. She was sick. Had been for months. The doctors said maybe a few weeks left. She was ready. Had lived a full life. Had built something that mattered. Had loved and been loved by someone who saw her worth when no one else would. But she wanted to leave them with something. A final message. A reminder of why the free kitchen existed. To the women of the free kitchen, she wrote in shaky handwriting. I was 22 years old when I sat on a feed crate eating cold scraps while my family celebrated without me. I believed I deserved it. Believed I was too fat, too quiet, too worthless to deserve a seat at the table. Then someone saw me. Someone refused to let me be invisible. Someone treated me like I mattered when I didn't believe I did. That moment changed everything, not because it rescued me, but because it showed me I was worth rescuing myself. I built the free kitchen because I wanted to be that person for others. I wanted to see women who'd been invisible. I wanted to give them chances no one else would. I wanted to prove that being discarded by the world doesn't mean you're worthless. It means the world is blind. Every one of you proved that. Every day you showed up, worked hard, took up space without apologizing. You proved that the people who told you that you weren't good enough were wrong. I'm proud of what we built together, not just the restaurants, but the culture, the family, the proof that kindness can be profitable and dignity can change lives. Keep it going. Keep seeing women who need to be seen. Keep giving chances to people who deserve them. Keep building tables where everyone gets a seat. And remember, you were never the problem. You were always enough. The world just couldn't see it yet. With love and gratitude, Clara Vale. Emma read the letter at Clara's funeral 6 weeks later. The main Denver restaurant was packed. Every woman who'd ever worked at the free kitchen was there. Hundreds of them. All ages, all sizes, all carrying stories of being invisible until someone finally saw them. Ronan sat in the front row. 85 now, quiet, but present. After the service, people shared stories. About Clara hiring them when no one else would. About her seeing their worth before they saw it themselves. About how she'd changed their lives by refusing to let them be invisible. Emma stood at the front holding Clara's letter. She saved me, Emma said simply. I was 24 and I thought I was worthless. She hired me anyway, taught me I mattered, showed me I could be more than the world told me I was allowed to be. She looked at the crowd. She did that for all of us. And the best way we can honor her is by doing it for others, by seeing women who need to be seen, by building tables where everyone gets a seat. The women applauded. After everyone left, Ronan sat alone in the empty restaurant. He was thinking about a barn in Wyoming, about a girl on a feed crate, about dragging a chair across the floor and sitting down with her because he couldn't stand to watch another person be invisible. That single choice had changed 2 lives completely, had led to restaurants and marriages and hundreds of women being given chances they'd never had before, had proved that seeing people who'd been invisible could change the world. I miss you, he said quietly to the empty room, but I'm grateful for every minute, for everything we built, for proving that broken people can create beautiful things. He stood up slowly and walked to the door, paused, looked back one final time at the restaurant Clara had built from nothing but courage and determination and refusal to stay invisible. Then he stepped outside into the Denver evening, and somewhere in the mountains a cabin stood empty, waiting for no one, holding memories of 2 people who'd saved each other and then spent the rest of their lives saving others. The free kitchen continued, locations across 10 states now. Hundreds of employees, thousands of women, given chances they'd never had before. And in every location, in every kitchen, there was a small plaque on the wall. It read, "Everyone deserves a seat at the table. Clara Vale." Below it was a photo, not of Clara as the successful businesswoman she'd become, but of a young woman sitting at a simple table in a mountain cabin, smiling at the person taking the picture, finally visible after 22 years of being invisible. Finally home after a lifetime of being unwanted. Finally believing she deserved more than scraps. The girl on the feed crate had built an empire, and she'd done it by refusing to let anyone else sit alone.